Monday, June 15th at 6 p.m. This meeting is an open meeting, has been posted. Please join me for Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Cherry, can you do roll call, please?
Crosby Brokenham.
Here.
Erica Connor.
Here.
Marshall Pinto.
Here.
Sorry, Gail Lesage.
Here.
Dale Porter.
Here.
Vito Schwartz.
He's excused.
Carolyn Simon.
She's excused.
Greg Gertz.
Here.
Sherman Chelsea here.
All right. No citizens' comments today. No presentations. We'll move on to consent agenda. Looking for the approval of school board meeting minutes of December 18th, 2023. Any questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, consent agenda is approved. We don't have any recognition, so we're going to move on to our favorite, policies.
So we have a couple policies up, and Mrs. Herman will go over those for us tonight. You'll note that one of them is a bylaw, and the reason why we are bringing that forward, bylaws generally govern how the board operates. There's a few policies in there that are listed in this policy that we don't actually have a policy on, so what we're just trying to do is update that. So if you look at the bylaw, I'll let Rachel do some more explaining, but that's generally that's the reason why it's on there.
So Joe just really kind of explained that one. So really that is the reason for the update. So if you look at the bylaw policy 0167, the reason for redacting those 3 lines is that we don't actually have those policies. So, and the reason we don't have those policies is that we have policy 7540, which covers us with those other 3 that's why we don't have those 3 policies, is we have a really robust policy, 7540. I'm gonna go over one of the additions to 7540, which is in 7530.02. So we don't need 7530.02 because we're adding language into our policy 7540. So that's why we're striking those 3. So that's the reason for the revision of the use of personal communication devices. Questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay. Then the next one, 3281. This is a new policy that we are proposing adoption of. We have this same policy already in place for our support staff, so it makes sense that we would have this policy in place for our professional staff. And really what this policy says is that if staff bring personal property to school, that we are not responsible for covering the damages should they incur damages to that personal property. Obviously within reason. So for example, if a staff member, breaks their glasses because of something that were to happen with a student, we would help to, make sure that that teacher is taken care of in those types of situations. This is for, I brought my personal refrigerator to school and the refrigerator broke because the power went out. Can you guys replace it? No, we don't do that. That's that policy. Questions?
Little refrigerator, I take it?
We hope so.
Okay, I'm good.
All right, and then the last policy is 7540. And so again, we already have this policy. We're just adding some language to this. So if you look under the responsible use guidelines for all users, we added some language around ensuring that when people are driving district-owned vehicles, they're using hands-free devices when they are operating those vehicles so that they're not, so they're being safe when they're driving. And then we also added language under the use of personal electronic devices. We added language specifically around not being able to record. So that's just obviously keeping current with current technology, that we're not just talking about taking images, but also taking recordings. And then we also added in language that's similar to 2 paragraphs above, but this is coming specifically from Neola. And this is language that, again, you cannot use your personal communication device to capture images or take recordings in any of those areas that are prohibited from doing so. So restrooms, locker rooms, etc.
Any questions or comments? All right, thank you.
So we'll be bringing those back then for a recommendation to adopt those policies at the January 29th meeting.
All right, moving on to WASB resolutions.
Yeah, so last week, Thursday, I emailed the delegate assembly packet with the proposed resolutions. I believe that we used to take a look at those at committee. So if there are any questions or discussions, I can go through the proposed resolutions this coming up year, if you'd like, or if there's anything specific that you would like. I think, Dale, are you sitting in the assembly this year? Or
Supposed to be Crosby, but she cannot make it. Cherry, any volunteers? I know you did last year. Wednesday.
Well, only if we can be done with lunch, then I don't have to leave.
we do have lunch scheduled, so we'll finish lunch when we finish lunch.
One of us will go, we can decide when we get there. Is that all right,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Dale?
Yep. Perfect. Any questions for Joe on the resolutions?
So how are we determining how these are voted upon?
Right.
So in the past, I don't know what your vision is now, is that as a collective, we would go through them one by one and give our delegate representative the vote based on consensus here. Are we doing something along those lines?
I'm not opposed. Our board is the first board that I've worked for that has entertained these as a group. So often they would send, the boards that I've worked with in the past, that they would send their delegate as the representative voice and then give a report out on the subsequent board meeting as to how the vote at the delegate assembly went for the board. But more than happy to go through each item, and we can, the group can talk about them, give feedback if there is any feedback on the resolutions, and then we can go from there.
That would be my vote, because then it's a board decision, not a one-person decision.
And having been in that delegate assembly, it could be very easy, if you had not discussed it prior, to do a wide variety of things. So
Sure.
I'm surprised to hear you say that other boards have not discussed that first.
Yep. They might also have not attended the delegate assembly, so.
Oh, I've seen a number of them there, so I think your last, yeah.
Yep.
Nope, never mind, no comment.
All right,
So-
let's go through them.
Let's go.
Okay, so the board resolutions submitted by September 15th. Neenah Joint School District, they're revising the Wisconsin Improvement Program with the internship program for consistency and accessibility to incentivize talent development and recruitment. So that is the first one from Neenah. The second one from Neenah is to create stipend program to incentivize clinician supervision of student teachers by licensed staff members. So the board member resolution submitted by September 15th. So this is where these are coming from. Is the past practice been to stop and pause and review?
Yeah, so are you, in the document, are you at resolution 2401?
I'm at 2401, student teachers and the WIP internship programs.
Yeah, do you mind if we just go through them one at a time real quick, give a yes or a no?
Absolutely. So the rationale for the student teacher program would be that Wisconsin continues to experience an extreme teacher shortage, which jeopardizes the ability of districts to provide high-quality education through well-trained available staff, as well as to fill specialty and substitute teaching needs. Targeting the teacher training pipeline, removing barriers, and offering creative incentives such as pay for student teaching, flexibility in internship licensure for districts, and the ability for education candidates to substitute teach are part of addressing this challenge.
Well, this is something we're currently doing,
Correct.
so I think we would support it.
Okay.
Yes?
Anybody else have comments? I agree. Okay, moving on to 24-02.
Yeah, so cooperating teachers help preserve, or pre-service student teachers understand the dynamics of the classroom. They mentor student teachers as they navigate the development of lesson plans that align with state standards, implement effective methodologies and strategies to meet the academic and behavioral needs of all learners, and design assessment tools to collect data for the purpose of monitoring progress. The state currently does not pay cooperating teachers who take on pre-service student teachers. Some teachers do take on the responsibility of having student teachers. However, it is additional work, and universities may be challenged to fill the pool of cooperating teachers for student teachers.
So are they asking for state money to pay for this?
So that it would be the, yes, compensate the WDPI to designate cooperating teachers for consistencies.
Steph?
Well, keep in mind though, just because it may or may not pass, that simply goes into the WASB resolution book, which is simply guidance
Correct.
for the lobbyists to go. So they can't technically, with this, ask the state for anything in particular. What I'm hearing, am I hearing this right? That the teachers taking on student teachers could receive an additional stipend.
Yes.
That's what they're asking for, if we would support that if it were possible. What do you think?
I think it should be left up to the individual boards to make.
Well, it would be left
Yeah.
up to individual boards, and that's actually going to be one of my cautions too, is now that we're just potentially supporting another differentiating layer when it comes to school funding. Because, okay, well, no, go student teach over there at that district because they paid their co-op teachers, and now what? It becomes a fight within the district? Or, no, I'll take a student teacher. No, I will, because I might get paid.
The DPI does put forward a number of ideas, I mean, either through local school boards like this resolution process, or they come up with it on their own, that essentially turn into unfunded, unstate-funded mandates towards school districts. So, you know, this could have the potential for opening the door for more cooperating teachers for student teachers. However, it could very well, Erica, get into the point that you made about you know, one district is paying $1,000 stipend, another district is paying a $2,000 stipend, another district is paying $3,000, and it's going to really come down into a local district's ability to afford it. So that would be my perspective as a superintendent on it, that we've had student teaching cooperative placements for decades, as far back as anybody can remember, and there was never anything at the state that said, we're going to pay the cooperating teacher. That was always part of it. It actually turned into a bit of a perk for the cooperating teacher, because as the semester went forward, the support for the individual student faded a little bit in the classroom, and they were really able to sit on the side. They didn't have to necessarily do the lesson prep. They needed to monitor the teacher's growth in the classroom. So there was some benefit to the classroom teacher.
So in your opinion, does it benefit Mukwonago or not?
I don't believe it benefits Mukwonago to support that.
Then it's a no for me.
That's a no for me.
No.
Anything that we can keep the DPI out of, I'm good with.
Okay,
2403, federal aids, facility barriers for students with disabilities. So they're looking to amend the existing resolution 2.6C, where it says federal funding for the removal of barriers in school facilities which may limit access by students and others, and to ensure compliance with federal law. The resolution seeks to update the language of WASB's existing resolution on federal aids to reflect more current terminology. It also seeks to tie the resolution more directly to current federal law. From my perspective, this is not, there's no negative to this for our school district, and it does just update with the current disability language.
Good with me.
2404, special education, general policy, the existing resolution 3.04 as follows, adding the underlined language and deleting the stricken language. The WASB supports careful diagnosis and screening of all children by professional employees to help identify children with disabilities as early as possible. The WASB also supports special programs that meet the educational needs of children with disabilities through CSAs, county children with disabilities education boards, and school districts. So this is an amendment. So what they're amending that statement to say the WASB supports best practice inclusion of children with disabilities in the general education environment. All children with disabilities deserve access to the general education environment to the greatest extent possible. So that this is this language is, again, going to reflect more current language in the realm of special education, but it doesn't fundamentally alter what we are required to do as a school district.
What do you think about the part where it says careful diagnosis and screening of all children by professional employees?
Yep, so that is our obligation under child find. If we have we suspect that a student has a disability, has an academic need, we need to do a screening of that child. We offer that, Christine. We have early child development days or opportunities for screening to all children. What are we, 3, 4?
3 times a year.
Okay. So we currently do this. This is in practice, and this is not part of the amendment.
So this isn't like we're going to test all students to see where they're at.
Correct.
This is like if you identify somebody, then you test. Okay.
Right, right. My 4-year-old sounds a little delayed in speech. We're going to go to the school district on September 15th and go through the screening process. That's
Okay.
what this is talking about.
Okay. Any objections, any comments from the board?
Fine.
That's fine with me.
Under 2405, state specialty schools. This is an amendment, existing resolution 3.481. The WASB supports continued operation of state-funded specialty schools that serve children who are, and they're striking, visually handicapped and hearing impaired, to replacing it with blind or visually impaired or deaf and hard of hearing. An IEP team should determine if a specialty school is the appropriate educational placement. So that's the amendment portion to it. Again, that captures more current disability language in the schools, special ed language.
Not a problem.
No problem with that.
2406, seclusion and restraint. The resolution aims, creates, the WASB supports best practices, resources, and training and funding to support school districts in seclusion and restraint practices with a focus on improving systems and reducing harmful events. Again, the rationale behind this is seclusion and restraint are widespread practices in schools throughout the state, and some advocates cite statistics that they are disproportionately used on students with disabilities and students of color. For example, students with disabilities are involved in a high majority of incidents, despite comprising only 14% of the statewide school population. So Christine, I'll ask if you could just weigh in and talk about what we do from a training standpoint. Rachel, if you could pass the mic.
Push that button, Christine.
Thank you. Guess I just needed that. So from a seclusion and restraint training perspective, we do training called nonviolent crisis intervention training. So we have three on-site trainers in our district who are also employees here. And so all of our special education teachers, all of our administrators, and all of our paraprofessionals all go through mandatory training. So it's mandatory. We used to do it every year, and now we're doing it every other year. But there's 2 components of it. One is verbal de-escalation, and then the other part is a physical intervention if necessary. We have very few physical restraints in our schools currently. The last 5 years since I've been here, our number of restraints and seclusions are significantly reduced.
Would you find most of them being from like special education kids or kids that are?
Primarily.
Okay.
So you use the term mandatory. Mandatory from the district or mandatory how?
Mandatory from the district.
So one of the things in resolutions through WASB that always makes me go is when a school district creates and presents a resolution to tell districts to do what they should be doing. And I kind of put this in that category, and it's not so much that I think that this is necessarily saying you need to be doing this training, because everyone does need to be doing this training, but they're asking for funding for it. So again, it's in one of these, hey, let's go lobby for funding for the things that we should be doing, when we should also then, in my opinion, be paying for the things that we should be doing.
I
So-
agree.
The hard part is you get to that delegate assembly and you vote no on this, you also then look like you're not for training and seclusion and restraint, which is why I think it's then important for whoever the delegate is to stand in line in that microphone and say, hey, we're voting no on this, not because we don't believe we should be doing this, but we believe that every responsible district should be doing it already because it's important to them on their dime. It doesn't need to be a state-funded thing because it may never be. Like, we're putting it out there like, hey, the state should pay for this. Well, and if they're not, does that give you an out for doing it? No, you need to do it anyway. My 2 cents.
I agree.
I don't disagree, but my question is, do you feel there are possibly districts who are not doing this, and so they put this resolution in there in order to see to it that all children, just because we're doing it doesn't mean someone else is doing it, and so it would bring awareness to the fact that it needs to be done?
Well, I hear that. I think it's probably a possibility that people aren't, districts aren't, but it says WASB supports continued best practice resources. So it's implied that it's already happening. And then says, and funding to support school districts to do it. So I guess in my mind, when I read it, I'm hearing just, hey, we're already doing it, we're supposed to be doing it, let's keep doing it, but let's ask for money to do it.
I think one thing to note too is the cost of doing seclusion and restraint training. It's not one that is a budget breaker. When I was an administrator in Denmark, which is a very small district in northern Wisconsin, we had the money to train all special ed staff and general ed staff as appropriate. Throughout my entire career as an administrator, this was never one of those things where I was like, how do I afford it? It was, a lot of those questions around special ed and the funding was associated with, how do I pay for the extra teacher after? How do I cover the cost of an alternative placement? Those were the big ticket ones. Seclusion and restraint training, the nonviolent crisis was not one of those big budget items that we struggled to provide.
May I suggest that we put, if we choose to say no, but be sure that our delegate then addresses it with the delegation, that it's because of the funding and that it's not because of the best practices part of it? So that, because then you can say that, say we are voting no because we feel that, it's not a funding issue, that districts should be responsible for that. So then it's not looked at like you're not doing this. I guess that would be my recommendation.
It's a no
Dale.
for me.
Yeah.
I hear you. Anybody else? Yea, nay?
No.
No? Okay.
So it's no with explanation,
It's a
that's
no.
what it is?
I mean, and to explain for those that maybe aren't familiar with this process, you do vote anonymously, thank you. So nobody knows that you're saying no. You have to make the choice if you would like to get up and speak in front of all of the districts of the state to make the point. So that's why I think that these discussions are beneficial, because Mukwonago as a school board can decide if we want to make a statement or just hit no and move on. So I think that's what Sherry is looking for in clarification. Is this something we want to make a statement on, or just vote no and move on?
I think just no, move on. That's what I would do if I'm gonna be the delegate. So if anybody wants to be the delegate and talk, feel free. Okay, I think it's a no, and we'll move on to 2407.
Yeah, 2407, the WASB supports state funding and staff to maintain the functions of the Office of School Safety, including but not limited to grants for schools, training for school, and law enforcement on preventing and mitigating school violence, and maintenance of the 24-hour hotline to confidentially report potential threats. If you remember back to 2018, then Attorney General Brad Schimmel, Mukwonago graduate,
83.
graduated in '83?
Yes, he
All
did.
right. Through his Department of Justice at the time, they created the $100 million school safety grant. At that time, they created the Office of School Safety. It was not built into the 23 through 25 biennial budget. And a lot of school districts and administrators wished that this maintained the funding and that they would increase local grants to address school safety throughout the state at school district level.
Do we know why it wasn't included?
There has been only speculation. There wasn't a clear answer. There was some discussion as to, does this stay at the Department of Justice? Does this go over to the Department of Public Instruction? Is this something that we would want to continue to fund, given all of the other funding pieces at the state? Or is this something that then is well established and that the school district should just then maintain going forward? But this has been, the 2018 safety grants were a tremendous help to schools, especially getting us all up to speed. So as an administrator, I would like to see that funding continue.
Yes for me.
Tom, do you recall, is that the year of our 3M safety glass film? Or is Andy still here? Was that the year of those grants that we were able to do all of that? Yeah.
And Joe, this is also relevant to the Speak Up, Speak Out tip line also, so the district uses that, so I would be very supportive of you guys looking at this as a yes.
I'm a yes.
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 Okay.
All right, yes?
Okay. 2408, artificial intelligence. The WASB recognizes the significance of AI as a newly developing technology that looks to be part of the state discussion as artificial intelligence evolves. The rationale: artificial intelligence is developing technology whose impact will have far-reaching consequences for education and society. The WASB should seek to be part of the ongoing legislative discussion surrounding AI regulation and the development so that the educational perspective is not left out of the conversation.
Stephanie's favorite.
Our entire secondary staff went through a PD about this for a little bit today. In theory, I think it sounds great. Yes, let the education department be part of the discussion. The hard part is it doesn't exactly say which way they would discuss it. Are they pro? Are they against? So it's very vague. And if I were to encourage our delegates sitting there, I would encourage that that be stated at a microphone. Because how do you vote on something that doesn't give you what you're actually voting for other than you get a seat at the table? Well, okay, but what if we don't want that particular viewpoint at the table? That's not really representing us then. So I'm not even sure what this says other than let us be there.
When I read it, granted, we shouldn't assume, but the way it's written, I assumed that it'd be kind of coming from like a Stephanie Blue's perspective of kind of keeping AI out of kids doing other papers.
Yeah, but there's a lot of districts that are fully embracing it. Let's learn how to use it. Let's learn how to use it well. Let's use it as a tool, like, because we're not going to be able to stop it. So can we fight it or do we embrace it? Which are big arguments to be had. The problem is this doesn't say what WASB would argue. So while I would technically say yes, let's vote yes on that, I would also encourage our delegate representative to stand at the microphone and say, okay, but what is WASB's position on this?
Anyone else? Board members?
So can I make this one clear in case we're doing
Sure.
what we're doing?
Absolutely.
So we're voting yes, but we'd like to state the fact that how can we vote on a resolution when we don't know how we're voting? How does the WASB stand on it so that they would have to reply or table it till
That's what
next?
I think.
I'm just asking what we're trying to, if we're representing what we're going to say.
I think that's reasonable.
It's reasonable.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Stephanie, you have any more input on that? Okay. Thank you.
I'm taking notes for you, Dale.
What's that?
I'm taking notes for you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
2409, Classroom technology, there's a special note there, just existing resolutions related to classroom technology are found in the resolutions book on page 24 and 25. They're looking to repeal the following existing resolutions: 3.30, 3.31, 3.32, 3.33, 3.34, 3.35, and 3.36, and then recreate it as the follows. Educational technology. Under 3.30, the WASB supports the use of educational technologies, including the use of online courses to allow local school boards to offer course content to students that would otherwise be unable to offer. 3.31, state funding. The WASB supports state-funded educational technology initiatives to ensure that school districts have the technology capacity for students to succeed in the 21st century and to meet state requirements such as online adaptive testing, the state accountability system, curriculum and instruction standards aligned to college and career readiness, and rigorous teacher and principal evaluation systems. 3.32, virtual charter schools. The WASB supports that publicly funded virtual charter schools must follow state accountability standards and transparency requirements. 3.33, CESAs and virtual charters. The WASB supports allowing CESAs to enter into cooperative agreements with individual school districts to establish virtual charter schools authorized by the board of the local school district. The WASB opposes legislation granting CESAs the authority to establish independent virtual charter schools. Should any CESA be authorized to operate a virtual charter school without entering into a cooperative agreement with a school district, the WASB supports limiting per pupil payments to any CESA authorized virtual charter school to an amount identical to the per pupil amount of the pupil's open enrollment transfer payment. This would prevent CESA authorized virtual charter schools from unfairly competing with school board authorized virtual charter schools. And the rationale, these resolutions are outdated. The changes are meant to update terminology and consolidate resolution language into a more concise and coherent policy. This is deleting, rewriting existing resolutions in accordance with the original intent, and nothing new was added.
Do we have a hard copy of the 2022-23 policies, resolutions?
The
The book?
resolution for this one,
I feel like there's usually one sitting in a drawer. Do we know? Jerry, is it behind you?
I did not get a packet.
Do we know who is registered online for our delegate? Did they get a packet in the mail? Usually get a hard copy in the mail of,
It would have been,
but she said she didn't.
Yeah, I didn't get a packet.
this was the packet that was sent to the district.
It always comes with last year's big packet of past resolutions, like their whole resolution handbook. That didn't come?
That did not come this year.
I want to compare, and I will do that on my own time if we want to keep moving through.
I'm curious to know why is there some sort of competition between WASB and CESA as far as charter schools?
I think the concern is for local school districts that operate virtual charter schools that get the open enrollment transfer into them for the student. So if a student were to go to a virtual school, they would get the $8,300, I think is the number. Whereas if the CESA were to be able to create that charter school as its own quote-unquote school, that could come with funding, because the CESA covers that large region. That would then come with the funding of a resident school. A resident student could come with the funding of a resident student, which would be in that $11,000 mark now.
How do you see this affecting us?
I think families that are going to select virtual learning are going to select virtual learning for their child. And they do so for a variety of reasons. I don't think that the language change has an impact on us as an organization. But to Erica's point, I don't have last year's, or I don't have the prior in detail statements that were made or resolutions, so I can't comment any more than that.
without looking at them, like anyone else, you don't really know. But as we are going with what we have above with the other resolutions, and if it's just an update in language, I would assume that as you know, you're not supposed to assume, I would think that the information and the opinion of how it is handled has not changed, only the wording. And if that is the case, I think it doesn't really matter, and it would be okay to say yes. That's just,
Jake, anyone else? Crosby?
I'm okay with it.
Yes, no? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
I'm able to email them to you right now if you would like me to.
Yes, please.
Please. All right, I'll move on to the next one, and if you guys want to read that, get back to it, we can come back.
2410, revenue limits. Repeal the following existing resolutions: 2.40, state cost controls; 2.41, modification of revenue limits, and create them as follows. 2.40, the state cost controls. The WASB is opposed to state-imposed revenue limits on school districts. 1992-13, 2010-6. So those were the prior resolutions. Additional revenue limitations. The WASB opposes any additional limitations that will force decreases in revenue to public school districts. This includes, but is not limited to, freezing property tax levies, creating a moratorium on school district referenda, delaying payments to school districts, and adopting a constitutional regulation of school finance. This goes back to 2002-18 and 2002-18, 2005-1. And 2.41, modification of the revenue limit. WASB supports exemptions from the revenue cap to allow for the needs of individual districts with respects to the requirements of their programs. That goes back to resolution 1994-11 and 1995-3. The WASB also supports the following: annually increasing per pupil revenue limits statewide by a dollar amount equal to or greater than the percentage increase, if any, in CPIU on a fiscal year basis applied to the statewide average revenue limit authority per pupil, 2012-3, 2017-6, allowing the carryover of any unused revenue authority, 1995-3, 1996-10. Changing the revenue limit FTE membership calculation to allow a district to use either a 5-year rolling average, 3-year rolling average, or the current year membership, whichever is greater, and allowing a district to apply to the DPI for emergency aid or revenue flexibility, 1996-10, 98-11, 03-7, 12-06, 18-4, including 100% of the full-time equivalent summer school membership for each of the years used in the computation of the revenue cap, 95-17, 2017-14, providing that a district's revenue limit be determined prior to the start of the district's fiscal year. That is there's no prior resolution cited on that one. The WASB supports legislation to implement a sliding scale formula factor multiplier to increase the membership of districts for revenue limit purposes, 2016-9. The rationale for this is parts of these resolutions are outdated. These changes are meant to update terminology and consolidate resolution language into a more concise and coherent policy. This is deleting, rewriting existing resolutions in accordance with the original intent. Nothing new was added.
Riveting. Whew.
I am not able to see what district submitted this. I'm
This
trying to
one-
scroll through and I can't.
Should be towards the bottom. I think they had a list of
Yeah, I
who
don't.
presented
see
it.
Or at least it's not in order.
it doesn't say,
One second, please.
2410, where is it?
In the end, it doesn't really matter. I just couldn't.
Yeah, Erica, I
find it.
don't know. I do not, so I have a packet of the resolutions submitted by September 15th. This was not a resolution in that packet. This might have been the work of the delegate, or the
Policy resolution.
policy resolution, where they're looking to combine and condense their work. Again, from a Mukwonago area school district perspective, I don't know how prior delegates have voted or weighed in on all of those other resolutions going back to 1992. But what this essentially is doing is condensing all of the prior resolutions into one for the purposes of, I guess, creating some ease, knowing that it looks like there's about a dozen other resolutions that this addresses.
Well, the reason I asked is because, yes, they did combine these into one, because a number of these issues have come up over and over and over and have been rejected over and over and over, and now they're lumped into this big thing that sounds great.
Right.
And that's what I'm frustrated about. And like this 1, 3, and 5 year rolling average has been denied multiple times at this policy and resolution delegate. And now they're putting it in there with, oh, annual increase of per pupil revenue limits. So doesn't that sound great? It's now indexed to CPI. That's what we were told it was always supposed to be, but never became. So of course we want to say yes, but they're just going against, in my opinion, in experience, what this delegate has said no to over and over. And here we're being faced to vote yes or no for one big lump sum.
There's a lot of things in this one.
Politics at its finest.
There's a lot of things that are rolled in there. I think some of them are very good and some of them aren't good at all. You know, when it says the WASB as opposed to state-imposed revenue limits on school districts, that's basically saying there's no $11,000 per pupil here. It's what amount do you want? You have full local control. And once upon a time, that was a story in Wisconsin school finance in the 80s and the early 90s, where school districts could make whatever tax levy amount you thought was right. And at some point, there was limits put on a school board. So not all school districts operate the same way. Some perhaps need a limit. Some maybe can do the right thing without a limit in place. So, I mean, at that same time, there's certain things in here that absolutely I think do make sense. I think I've said this before, we figure out how much money we have in September when we do our third Friday count. That's like launching an airplane and finding out how much gas you have once you're already after takeoff. That's a little hard. So when you lump all these things in here, it's like, this is now difficult. This shouldn't be an all or nothing. It's difficult, so.
But maybe that's the vote. Because I think that's what they're trying to do, is make it all or nothing and say, no, we don't want them combined.
Is this one where you just suggesting you stay silent?
So either stay silent, you cannot vote, you can NA, or you can write, or as a body, if we wanted to, we could write an amendment to submit, separating them out.
I'm not opposed to an amendment.
You're not opposed to an amendment?
No, I'd like to
Talk
see
to
them
microphone, please, Crosby.
I'd like to see them separated out. Because there are some good ones in here, and there are some ones that I'm not okay with. I don't want to agree to all of it at the same time.
That being said, whoever's going to be a representative could simply ask for an amendment of voting on individual points rather than have to write out a whole amendment. You could just say, I make a motion to amend this whole new policy as individual. 2.40A by itself, 2.41 A, B, C, each of those individually. That they be voted on separately would be my suggestion. I would guess you would get a second on that, and then the whole body would have to vote on the amendment. I have a feeling you would also go through. Sorry, delegate, rep, it's gonna make the meeting a lot longer. But if it were something that I would have to decide if I were standing up for, I would fight myself pretty hard to make sure that this was done individually. But again, that's up to the rest of the board.
Yeah, it sounds like they're sweeping a bunch of stuff into one big pile.
And if this resolution failed, Erica, and I'm just looking at you based off of your experience, we would go back then to what the original list of, like 2.40 state cost controls, 2.41 would be voted down, and then you would be back to all of those individual amendments that are listed, or resolutions that are listed in this resolution. So that 94.11, 95.3, that would remain in place then.
Correct.
Assuming the amendment fails, and assuming then this fails.
Yep.
I would think if the amendment fails, this will end up being passed, would be my guess. So I don't see any sort of big
You-
going back.
Okay.
You think if the amendment failed, that,
If someone here were to offer an amendment to separate them out,
Mhm.
and that didn't even get a vote, and they said, no, we're not going through that process,
Okay.
then my guess would be, when it goes back to the original, that this would
you
pass.
think it would?
I would think so.
Probably.
So if that happens, how do you want to vote?
I personally would not vote if that happened
At all?
at all.
Abstain?
I would abstain, but that's me.
Jake, Crosby?
Isn't this similar? We don't know what is in there already, right? I mean, this is not to necessarily do all this stuff, but it's to change it. It just says repeal and recreate.
Jake, talk to the microphone, please.
It's repeal and recreate, so without a comparison, we don't necessarily know what is changing or what, if anything, is really being proposed, correct?
Well, I can tell you right now, you can't carry over any unused revenue authority. You do not have a annual increase for per pupil allocation attached to the CPI. You do not have no cap on revenue limits. So they're asking for a lot of potential money here. They're asking for spending with no oversight, essentially.
We don't have that now, but this is talking about whether they support it or not.
So
So
That's
then
why
when
I'm
it,
asking, like,
yeah.
what's in the, I don't necessarily know what the original resolution says, what's really actually.
So I mean, like in current practice with revenue limit laws, once upon a time, revenue limits, we started off at $5,300 per student in 1993. Those dollar amounts all the way to 2009 were increased by CPI. So you kind of knew, like, if everything goes up and there's math there to support it, then your amount per student's going to go up. In 2009, that was repealed. And then there was a bunch of zeros that were handed out year after year. So it's like everything, funding got frozen by and large for a decade. Not completely, but a lot. So I think it's a good idea that it's a known, I think linking school funding and indexing it to CPI is great. I think getting rid of revenue caps altogether is probably not a good idea. That's just my professional opinion. So there's things, again, that are great in this, and there's things that I don't think are good. And if you have to vote for all or nothing, I say either abstain or vote.
I would vote no.
Yeah.
If we, if
I-
we can't,
yeah.
if we can't separate them out,
I agree.
I actually think the right thing to do is to vote no
And not abstain?
and not abstain.
And again, if you do, it would be with some explanation as to why you're doing it, so everybody else, I believe it.
I'm
I
happy
believe it-
to go and give all the explanations if you want. I'm not running again. I'm not going again. So I would be willing to go just for this, to make the explanations if you two would rather not.
Why do we have
God
to
bless
make an
you.
explanation? Like,
Well,
why are we
I w-
trying to justify ourselves?
I was just gonna say, I believe that we can make a difference by doing so. That's what I was just
It's
saying.
just to
Okay.
enlighten the other, all
Because other people there-
435 districts are sitting there, and you don't ever have another opportunity to speak what you believe as a board to the whole body of Wisconsin Association of School Boards, outside of this one day for
Okay.
3 hours a year. But I also believe in handing the torch, so that's why I keep suggesting that if you guys go and do it,
Veep, she's pointing at you.
that you should get up at the microphone and you stand up for what Mukwonago School District represents.
And that is what I'm saying too, Dale, because it's so short notice to getting there that I really do think you should go, because I don't think you've done it before, and I think it would be something that you should do.
Who's the rookie?
And so, but I also do believe that we should, we sit here as a body and we have intellectual intelligence, and I think that it's worth sharing, because I don't know that all the other districts are in the same position that we are. And so, I just think it's important. So that's, whatever. I think if we're gonna do this for yes or no, I think we should try and do an amendment, and that they're not together. And if it fails, then we can decide how to vote, and I would, if you're not willing to I would take Erica's, volunteering to do it, to let her do it.
So yes or no?
Well, we'll talk
on
about that
separating?
part later, but if an amendment is made for it to be separated out, then we need to have our answers in the event that it's separated out.
Mm-hmm.
So 2.40A, additional revenue limitations.
Before we go there, Jake, you in favor of separating them out, or yes or no?
I am, I'm in favor. of
Separating,
them
okay?
Yeah, my first
Not
preference
applicable.
is to separate out.
Okay.
If that fails and it's a blanket yes or no, then my vote is no.
Okay,
I'll go with that.
all right.
Yep.
Then we just go through all of them, and then, so we know which way to vote.
Well, we have to have, we have
So-
to have verbiage for an amendment.
So do we oppose additional limitations? Are we for additional limitations? We don't want additional, but are we for removing state-imposed revenue limits on school
No.
districts?
I'm not.
As much as they've been detrimental at times to us, I'm also not for free spending
Right.
at will across the whole district. So I would also say no with you.
So A is a no.
So A, no.
2.40A is no for three of us.
No.
Jake?
No.
No for Gail.
No.
Bert?
No.
Okay,
So 2.41A, sounds like Tom is on board for this one.
yeah.
Yes.
And
For
then
pupil
B,
revenues to see, okay, so that's one, or A. What's B?
allowing the carryover of any unused revenue authority.
Are you able to give us a practical example of what that looks like, Tom, or no?
So if we under levied,
Oh,
so whatever you have, you can get $11,000 per student. Let's say you only take 10,900 per student. You leave 450 grand on the. Yeah, if you under levy, you have 1 year to get that back. So then you would over levy the next year. But if you skip that, then it's gone and you've shrunk your $11,000 permanently. So this kind of says, hey, we're not going to levy the whole amount. We'll leave some. It gives you the flexibility to maximize your revenue limit authority. But if you choose not to maximize it and you leave some money, if you want to access that at a later year, you can.
So there are some school districts that have under-levied for a decade or more. And if a school board were to turn over and the new school board wanted to levy to the maximum authority, Tom, that would be the year then when you could, as an individual person, individual taxpayer, see a substantial increase, because that percentage could ultimately be 10%, 12%, 13%, pretty large numbers that the district then in one vote wants to make up.
So I believe in the 90s and maybe even the early 2000s that the school board at that time under levied and minimized their per member amount, which is what you all inherited.
So good for the district or bad for the district?
I think this gives you flexibility. It doesn't increase taxes. It gives you the flexibility to maybe decrease taxes. So it's your flexibility. I say support it.
but are you not potentially allowing for a scenario where in 10 years down the road, somebody could ask for all of those under levied revenue limits back at one time? So you might give yourself flexibility now, but a power later that could be very detrimental, or no?
That board would have to strongly consider what their impact is on the, once upon a time, there was a Christmas Eve board meeting to discuss something just like this. So I think everyone wants to avoid that, so do smart things and vote smart, and you'll be fine, but this gives you flexibility at the end of the day. Yes, it could go awry. If you under levy, give it all back now. That's gonna punch taxes up significantly, so I'd say you can do it, but proceed with caution. So this gives flexibility, I say, if used wisely, so I'd support it.
Could I just say, I know we're going through these individually, we're going, so like 2.41 for
Can you get closer to the mic?
2.41, we're going through A through F.
Yep.
And we're going through those individual, but what this really is it's, do we want to repeal 2.40 and 2.41 as they're originally written? If you look at what's currently in there, 2.41, it's A through W. There's, I just looked it up right here.
That's what I've been trying to
There's a lot more in there, so this isn't an apples to apples decision where we're going point by point and deciding if it's something we want or not. There's a bunch of stuff that's being removed, and then they're putting a select few things back in to replace it. So, I don't know how we can, if we want to be diligent and make a decision, I think we got to look at this holistically, right? And understand what's being taken out and what's it being replaced with. It's 2.41 A through W. I just looked it up on the wasb.org website. And that's why I was asking before. I know we don't want some of these things per se, but I know some of these things aren't currently in place per se, but it's kind of irrelevant because what this is about is whether WASB supports it or not. And to vote against something when we don't even know if it's supported or not in the original resolution, I guess I don't see the value in it. I think we gotta understand all the pieces of this if we're gonna be making decisions.
Agreed. Can we come back to this one?
Yes.
I think what I've heard is let's make an amendment to break them out. And if that fails, then vote no. So I feel like we're at least that far.
But there's a bunch that are being eliminated with this as well. So
If this
lot-
was, yeah,
there's a lot to unpack here. I guess, you know, I don't know. If we don't understand this thoroughly, my vote would just be to make no changes whatsoever.
And, yeah, that would be like no amendment at all, just vote no?
That's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I,
That makes sense.
I know we started heading down this path already, but I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention.
I can live with
No,
that.
that makes sense.
I can too, because that's what we're saying, is it's kind of, we don't agree with
This isn't a
putting
yes
them,
or,
putting them all together. We
Right.
don't want to do this,
if you're gonna make this a yes or no question of this magnitude,
then no.
then no.
Everybody good with no?
Yep.
Okay, let's move on. 2411.
Licensure, so the existing resolutions relating to certification licensure are found in resolutions book on page 36 through 38, and the existing 4.80 evaluations is found on page 38. So the proposal is to repeal and recreate the following existing resolutions: 4.60 general policy, 4.61 shortages, 4.62 temporary certification, 4.63 alternative certification, 4.635 DPI licensing of clinical counselors, 4.64 performance-based licensure, 4.65 teacher competency exam, 4.66 professional growth, 4.67 mentoring duties, 4.68 charter school teachers, 4.69 revocation, 4.80 evaluations. By recreating them to read the following: 4.60 general policy. The WASB supports a teacher license system that fosters highly educated, highly trained, and effective professional teaching force with reasonable flexibility to meet the needs of our members with regard to staffing supply challenges. 4.61 shortages under A, teacher shortages and alternative licensure pathways. The WASB supports reasonable efforts to provide pathways to licensure for teaching candidates in subject or content areas where there is a shortage of licensed teachers, provided that candidates have a bachelor's degree and are qualified to be in a classroom as demonstrated by appropriate experience, knowledge and skills in the subject or content area, and rigorous training in pedagogy, assessment, and classroom management. That comes from Resolution 2015-17. Technical education teacher shortage. The WASB supports reasonable efforts to increase supply of licensed technical education teachers, including in technical education content where the shortages are most acute. That's from Resolution 2015-04. C, social work certification and licensure. The WASB supports efforts to increase the supply of school social workers, school counselors, and mental health providers throughout the state. The WASB will work with the DPI to address existing obstacles to school social worker licensing with an emphasis on obstacles faced by districts and regions of the state that are located remotely from universities conferring degrees currently recognized by the DPI for licensure. Under 4.62, temporary certification, the WASB supports temporary certification of teachers in grade levels or content areas other than those in which they are already certified to meet our members' need with regard to staffing supply challenges. Comes from 1982-5. Mentoring residency model. The WASB calls on the superintendent of public instruction to actively promote alternative administrative and teacher certifications that includes a mentorship, residency, and a training program. 1991-15, 2005-22. 4.635, DPI licensing of clinical counselors. The WASB supports legislation authorizing the Department of Public Instruction to issue an educator license to clinical counselors so no school districts can employ clinical counselors to provide mental health services to students the same way other licensed district staff are employed to do so. 4.65, teacher competency exam. The WASB supports legislation that would require teachers to pass a state competency exam or demonstrate competency through alternative means before they are granted a license to teach in a Wisconsin public school district. 4.68, charter school teachers. The WASB supports allowing teachers granted a charter school license in a particular subject area to teach additional subjects under the supervision and or direction of another Wisconsin certified teacher currently teaching in that subject area, provided that the student learning meets standards applicable to the charter school, 2011-16. 4.69, revocation. WASB supports legislation to require the DPI to revoke the license of any teacher who has been dismissed or non-renewed by a school district for intentionally using the school district's technology to download, view, or distribute pornographic material in violation of the district's acceptable use policy. The WASB further supports requiring the DPI to make information about the disposition of such cases publicly available if revocation is the result of the hearing. It goes back to 2011-17 resolution. 4.80, evaluations. The WASB supports efforts of school districts to systematically and periodically evaluate and compensate teachers, administrators, and support staff members based on performance. 1989-1 and 1996-8. Staff improvement, professional development. The WASB supports the efforts of school boards to provide staff professional development to address the staff improvements at the local level through effective evaluation and improved supervisory techniques that include coaching and mentoring. 1991-11. Student achievement as performance criteria. The WASB supports legislation that would allow districts to develop a teacher evaluation instrument that would include all test assessment results as part of the criteria for evaluating teachers. The WASB supports efforts to develop a model teacher evaluation system, provided that such a system is not mandated, is implemented gradually, and allows districts to have piloted their own rigorous teacher evaluation systems to continue to use those evaluation systems. 1999-16, 2012-15. WASB supports efforts to develop definitions of key guiding principles of a high-quality educator effectiveness system, create model performance-based evaluation systems for teachers and principals, build a regulatory framework for implementation that includes how student achievement will be used in context, and make recommendations for methods to support improvement in recognized performance. It comes from 2012-15. Rationale, these changes are meant to remove outdated language, update terminology, and consolidate resolution language into a more concise and coherent policy. This is deleting, rewriting existing resolutions in accordance with the original intent. Nothing new was added.
Birch, can you summarize that? There's a lot there.
Jake, is the other ones, are you looking the other ones up?
Yeah, it's the same, it's similar.
It's similar that there's more there, or it's
Yeah.
similar that they're just rewording them?
That there's more, so it looks like, so like professional growth, it looks like that,
Talking to Mike Jake.
looks like
They're close.
repeal and recreate the following existing resolutions, so like professional growth, 4.66 is gone. The original one said the WASB supports proposals providing the continuing proof of growth requirements for licensure. That's, looks like it's gone. 4.67, so the original one was the WASB supports as a professional obligation that teachers perform mentoring duties without additional compensation. That's gone. I tried to catch them all as we were going through it, but I'm sure there's more as well.
Of those that were red, are there any red flags to our administrators in the room? Or do these all seem friendly for the goals that we have as a district?
So overall, these, again, all of these resolutions are in place, and some of them they've been the way we've been doing business for better than a decade now. So evaluation systems, districts have had the opportunity to build in performance-based pay systems. I mean, all of this has been there present an option for us. There have been challenges to they talk about the shortages of teachers. And there have been a number of challenges that have happened over the last, 2024, I'd say the last 12 or maybe 20 years, I guess is what I would say, where there have been things that have been put in place that have made the university experience more difficult for somebody who wants to come out to be a teacher. That began back in about 2003-04 with the implementation of a praxis exam, where they were looking at an ACT-like test for teachers coming out that tested areas of reading, math, and et cetera. What that did was filter out a level of people based off of that particular competency-based thing. So for instance, if you were going in to be an ELA teacher, they were asking for certain levels of proficiency in math that were difficult for people to complete. That math was not part of it. I mean, you could do the basic day-to-day math that anybody needs to do, but you were starting to get into more advanced algebra, and that started to become a barrier. If you fast forward to sometime around 2013-14, the DPI then put in a program called EdTPA, which increased the rigors again for student teachers to come out, and that was a very large portfolio-based thing. A lot of student teachers at the time got into it and said, I'm not doing this. A lot of them heard about it in their bachelor's degree and said, not doing this. And that shrunk the candidate pool in and of itself. For those of you who were on the board or were paying close attention back when Act 10 was passed, that too had an impact on the university programs. A lot of university programs saw a decline in enrollment, and kids weren't going into education at that time. So a lot of the steps that are mentioned are ways to kind of go back and address what was being asked of schools after, I'd say, those three relatively large changes in teacher licensing and the educational environment. So that's the environment that we are in today. Teacher evaluation and feedback is a good thing. Administrative evaluation and feedback is a good thing. So those are all here. I didn't realize fully how old some of these resolutions were around staff improvement and professional development going back to 1991. Those were things that really started to take place in education in the early to mid-2000s. So be that what it is, there's nothing in here that surprises me as an administrator. The factors that have impacted the teacher pool go well beyond what is in this particular resolution.
What is your opinion on 4.635, DPI licensing of clinical counselors?
So school counseling there's training in school counseling. There's nothing that prevents us from bringing clinical therapists into schools. We have arrangements with the GALS Institute here. In all of my prior districts, we had on-site mental health providers coming in who had a clinical approach. The school counselor, the school social worker, the school psychologist, their role is to remove barriers to learning. They're not there in necessarily a therapeutic role. They're there to remove the barriers that are in the school to help a kid learn better and be more comfortable within the school day. So, I'm not in favor of replacing school counselors with clinical counselors in schools. But I'm also not opposed to having clinical counselors come in and work with kids in schools. I think the role is two different roles. And they conquer different objectives that we have.
And it doesn't look like 4.635 is changing much. It's almost already in there.
There's nothing in here that makes me want to vote no.
No, I'm okay with this.
Gail?
Yes. No.
Yes?
Sounds good to me.
Birch?
Yes.
Think we're all good. So it's a yes.
It does remove the support for educator effectiveness, just so you know. That they took out. And superintendent evaluations. Just saying.
I look forward to the feedback.
All right. All good on resolutions? Okay, moving on to handbook update.
All right, so we have the handbook. Again, in your packet, you have a clean copy of a handbook, so hopefully it was a little bit easier to read without all the green and the red in it. There was just one small tweak that we accounted for based on our first snow day of the year. And that was around the questions that came in regarding staff who were on a leave of absence and how we were going to handle that. And so in consultation with, again, legal counsel with other districts, we did make a tweak on page 31 around how we were going to handle staff who were on a current leave of absence when there was an emergency school closure. So that was one change that we made in the draft. And that was that if you are an employee who's on a leave of absence during an emergency school closure, your leave of absence takes precedent. So we don't change anything, we don't extend your leave, we don't adjust wages. You wouldn't have come to work if we had school, so we don't do anything differently because we didn't have school. And again, that was in consultation with all other area districts as well as our legal counsel, that's the practice. And those leaves are, again, FMLA is a federally mandated leave. So that was the only change to the handbook, and any questions that you have?
I do. I just read the part about the campaigning, how there's no campaigning in schools. How does that work with people's vehicles?
That's
Put magnets, flags, stickers on their cars.
So, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, if it becomes a distraction to the learning environment, we address it. Otherwise, I don't believe that we do anything unless it's a distraction.
Our ability to essentially say no to something would be if where there's the captive audience. And parking lots generally, unless it involves weapons or drugs, parking lots are generally not considered the captive audience space like the classroom is. So we would have the ability to regulate what would go on inside of the schools to a degree, but the parking lot, again, is generally a pretty safe space. If there was something on there that was profane, we would intervene if it was profane. If it was completely inappropriate for a school environment, advocating violence, we would intervene at that point. But a Trump sticker on somebody's bumper sticker or on somebody's bumper, a Biden sticker on somebody's bumper wouldn't be anything that we would be intervening in.
Good, thank you. And then one other just question about, since we passed our behavior policies for all the schools, just wondering like how that's working out. Are the schools better at reporting and discipline, since we're all kind of on the same page now, all the schools?
Yeah, so Christine has led us through 2 discipline norming sessions, and what we are seeing as we bring behavior data forward, we're seeing that staff are having a better understanding of reporting student misconduct, and there's greater follow-up on what the consequences for those offenses.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
I'll be bringing the handbook forward then for recommendation for adoption on January 29th. And then once, hopefully that's adopted, we'll start working on the support staff handbook next.
Yay!
Yay.
Rachel, did you say that change was on page 21?
31.
Thank you.
Yeah, under emergency school closings.
All right, staff retention.
All right, so staff retention, this is, Tom and I will both probably speak to this. So we are continuously working on staff retention in all areas, but in obviously particularly our most hard to fill positions. One of those, which is our buildings and grounds, specifically our custodial staff. And so what you have here is just a breakdown of some of the hiring process and the time that we're spending to hire for this particular group of employees. And this has been compiled by Ron Pond, who's one of our facilities managers. You can see that the number of hours that we're spending for this employee group is substantial for then the amount of employees that we are retaining. And so one of the things that we do with any employee who leaves our system is offer them an exit interview. We want to know why it is that you're leaving, how could we have better retained you, especially if it's a staff member that, again, we would have liked to have retained. And so one of the things that we heard, especially from this employee group, is that they're not compensated until they've been on the job for 4 weeks. And we worked with Tom, worked with the business office to see if there was any way around that. And just based off of regulations that his office has to follow, we can't. And so what we can do is offer a $250 signing bonus. So we can give them some compensation within that 2-week window. And so we are recommending that as a one form of, again, compensation, that they're not waiting 4 weeks to get some form of compensation. The other piece that we're looking at in terms of staff retention in this area is looking at a overall base wage increase. So looking at their hourly compensation being increased from $16 per hour to $19 per hour. Currently, we have 23 total staff members that this would impact, and as you can see, this is going to impact us or represent a $63,000 investment. So again, working with Andy Wagner, working with Ron Pond, we're really looking to stabilize this position in our system. It's an incredibly instrumental position in our system, and just the continued staff rotation that we have is not good for us. So we think that these two moves will help us to increase the staff retention in this area.
Crosby?
I think Erica was first.
Oh, Erica.
Go ahead.
We probably have the same question. You go first, we'll see.
I just wanted to know, what is the reason why we can't pay them until a month after they've started? Like, is it? I'm just curious what the
that's fine.
barrier is.
So typically when, we pay our hourly staff, let's say they work the 1st of the month through the 15th of the month, we spend, 6 days, 7 days collecting timesheets, getting everything in and processed. So for time spent working on the 1st through the 15th of the month, they'll get paid on the 30th of the month. So basically there's a 2-week lag from the time that you worked to that time that you get paid for that work.
Okay.
There's just really no way for us to accurately process payroll for time worked on the 15th, like through the 15th, and then to get that paid on the 16th is almost impossible.
Right.
Even like with our banking institution, when payroll gets deposited on a Friday, we have to submit that 48 hours prior. So when you just look at the totality of it, as much as I want to be practical in every regard we possibly could be, this is just one where we couldn't make the flexibility happen, but this would help solve that issue.
Okay. No, I get that because I run payroll too for my job, but
Is it like that for you guys?
yeah, it's about 48 hours that we would need to.
I guess in terms of the 2-week lag, I guess, do you have something
Well,
similar?
we only pay, we pay once a month anyways.
Okay,
So but we're very upfront with our employees on that.
okay, sure.
Erica?
I would never take a job that I had to wait 4 weeks for my first paycheck. There's just no way. Do you know what I mean? And for the demographic that we're targeting, for the amount that we're paying, I'm assuming most of these people are in that same boat. So I'm thinking there has to be creative outside of the box ways to think about this, to address this. Because when I read these numbers, starting with 455 applications down to hiring 14, but 8 leaves, so net 6 employees, after all of this effort, something really creative needs to happen. Because this just is like, it feels like a total waste of time, team, effort, all of the things. I will say, I have also been in a job where, up front, they said, okay, you can get paid on week 1 with the assumption of X amount of hours in performance. However, when time comes and we realize the actual, there will be an adjustment made. And I think that that's something creative that could potentially take place in order to keep people, because a $250 signing bonus for a month, I'm not saying we need to do more of that, but that does not carry a family over for 4 weeks. So, I mean, I would kind of laugh at that and be like, sorry, still no.
So we did explore, because, this is an employee group that does not have a signed contract. And because they don't have a signed contract, we can't do anything in terms of, we're gonna pay them wages and then take away those wages, for example, if they leave within those first 3 weeks, or if they don't commit to X amount of, right, like what we agree to. Because that's the other concern, right? If we pay them for those first 3 weeks in advance and then they don't show up or they don't stay, we can't take away those wages once they've paid them, because that is against the law. And so we have been exploring some other creative solutions. I think one of the pieces, again, that we really did look at with the exit interviews that we've been looking at were we heard loud and clear, it was partly, yes, the 4 weeks, but it was also the base wages, that people can go and get a job in many other places and make more than that $16 an hour. So we do think that raising it to $19 an hour is also a really effective retention strategy, that even though they might have to wait a little bit longer for their paycheck, that mere increase to $19 an hour is gonna help us. Because when people are leaving us, they're telling us, I love it here, I love the people we're working with, the training was great, but I can get paid more to go and work in this position. So we think that that is also gonna be an effective strategy.
Were benefits
Jerry?
also a concern? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Jerry?
So I agree with everything that's being said, especially that I can see a 2-week lag, but a 4-week lag is just, I work with people in my position that they can't pay their mortgage. So if they're getting a job, you can't wait a month.
So I guess it's not a 4-week lag, it's really up to a 2-week lag. Again, you work the 1st through the 15th and then get paid for that work on the 30th. Every two weeks, then you continue to get paid. Sometimes the week is 2 weeks, the lag is 2 weeks, sometimes it's 1 week. It depends on where they begin working relative to our 2-week payroll cycle. But this would allow for people to have at least $250 deposited within their first 14 days of working for us.
Almost every job I had, same way. Even if we got paid weekly, we wouldn't get paid for 2 weeks then.
Mm-hmm.
So bi-monthly, you get paid at the end of the month if you start at the beginning.
So I mean, I don't think this is an indefinite ask or situation. I think this is something that we'd like to work with here through the remainder of the school year. And we can come back and report how it went and if we have a need to continue it or not.
I think it's worth a try.
I agree.
Yep.
Time will tell.
And I think the increase is definitely needed.
I just have, Jake?
Do we ever look at like referral bonuses or anything like
Yeah,
that?
we have
We
that
do
in
have a
place.
referral bonus in
And that,
place.
is that in this case too?
Mhm.
And
For
has
any
that
employee group.
made a difference for us? Do we see a lot of that?
We had a handful this year, so we don't see it being used. I would say, this is only my first year, so I can't speak to like how historically it's been done. I had a handful this year. But yes, it's for any employee group.
I guess there weren't too many referrals into our $16 an hour job
I can imagine.
because you want to help your friends.
Crosby?
Could this group be lumped into what we're going to talk about next with access to the employee clinic?
They are
They
in
are.
that group.
They are,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
I didn't see it specifically on there, so I wanted to
Yep.
make sure.
Yep.
Since we're talking about putting money out there, like incentives for people, there was a community member who was wondering about how the $2,000 sign-on bonus for teachers, how that was going. Has that been implemented, and has it worked?
For teachers or for?
For student teachers?
For student
Sign-
teachers.
Yes.
So we don't have just a blanket $2,000 student teacher sign-on bonus.
Correct. Yep, we don't.
We
You're
don't,
right,
okay,
Rachel.
yeah, correct, we do not. Go ahead.
We did offer a form of payment, so there's like a small differentiator between a student teacher and an intern. An intern is somebody who will get paid, will come with a recommendation. Please help me out, Stephanie and
yeah.
Rachel,
Yep.
if I'm missing something here. They're going to come with strong recommendations from their university or college, so they're really like one of the better teaching candidates coming out of their graduating class. And then they have the ability to supervise a classroom up to 50% of their time with us. So an intern basically is a student teacher on steroids, so to speak. And we've done this in one instance, and that teacher now works for us. So
Okay.
it worked.
Okay.
Just point of order though too, that is not on our agenda. I think if it's something we want to hear about, we should put it on an agenda and get a formal report of an update on it.
Okay.
Just to make sure that we're not putting you guys in a position to give us inaccurate information off the top of your head.
We're happy to come back in February with that.
Perfect. Any other questions, staff retention? All right, thank you. Employee Health Clinic.
All right, so again, as a way to continue to make Mukwonago Area School District a destination district, we have the employee clinic, and it continues to receive very favorable feedback. We are employing a benefits survey at the end of January to all of our employees who currently take the health insurance benefit to continue to get feedback. But again, myself and Katie Navrowski went around to all schools in right around October, November-ish to do listening sessions around what our employees were feeling regarding the new health plan. And the employee clinic, again, was one of the most favorable pieces of feedback that we heard around the plan. And so in looking to continue to, again, make this a destination district, we would like to open up the employee clinic to all staff, specifically, again, our 10-month support staff who might not be benefit eligible to be able to utilize the clinic. And so Tom can speak a little bit more, but we have in here just some research behind what, how the clinic would support the staff retention piece. So again, the employee well-being, job satisfaction, reduced stress. But then also just from the logistical side, we have worked with our clinic around the capacity. They do currently have the capacity on a daily basis. They are currently going with unfilled appointments. Tom has the numbers of how many of our staff currently are on the benefit, how many we would be looking to add on with this plan. But again, the feedback continues to be that for our staff who aren't benefit eligible, to be able to access the clinic at a very low cost copay option, this is something that is very favorable. It also promotes our employees being at work. So if you can get into the clinic, get an appointment, get an antibiotic, get whatever it is, that is going to help us to keep you, again, in some of these hard to fill positions. Our special education paraprofessionals are, again, buildings and grounds, where it's really hard to find substitutes when you have to miss work. So.
Yeah, so we have just over 700 employees. 709 are built in our budget right now, and 495 of them are offered benefits, but 125 of them decline those benefits. And then we have 213 part-time employees who are not offered benefits. So between this, we have staff members who are offered benefits. If some of those are teachers, the cost of a substitute teacher for a day is anywhere between $125 and $150, generally speaking. If they're sick and they're going to miss a day, we're paying that $150 for sure. If we can get them in at the clinic, quickly, and they're not missing a day of work, or maybe they're just missing an hour and they're getting covered by an employee, this makes sense for the employee and for the district. So opening up access in that sense is going to lead to reduced sick time. In terms of the 213 employees who are part-time employees, this is something that would be really beneficial for them. They might not have health insurance through their spouse, or maybe they're not married and they don't have access, can't afford it, whatever their situation might be. This would be something that would be a strong retentionary tool where they would probably think twice about, giving up a job that offered something like this. So our full-time staff, we have 370 employees in our district out of our 700 that are offered and accept health insurance. When we count in those 370 employees plus their spouses and dependents, we have about 1,100 lives that can access the clinic and use it. we would be adding to those 1,100 lives another 338. So there are appointment slots that go unfilled. The cost is a fixed cost. So whether those appointments get used or not, nothing changes. We think it's a good idea to take those empty slots that aren't being used, make them available to our employees, and get obviously more bang for our dollar and get those employees healthy whenever we can. So the game plan at this time would be to start off, as we move through the rest of the year, charging $25 per an appointment. So if you're not on our health insurance and you want to go to the clinic, the out-of-pocket cost would be $25. We can look to adjust that in the future, up or down. Right now, we're just going to start off by writing a prescription if you need one, but then it's on the employee to take that prescription, get it filled with wherever they're going to go. We do have the ability to offer prescription drugs.
Do they pay for that then?
At this time, we're going to start off by saying no. But again, that's one of those things where we'll find out what works for us and see if that's something maybe we do for the 24-25 school year. Maybe we just keep it as is. So that's an option the school board has at this time. We're just going to write the prescription, and then they can go get it filled. If they don't have health insurance, they can use GoodRx, and we'll help them in that regard so we can help them get it as cheap as possible from Walgreens or Metro Market, Walmart, whatever.
Can you explain like what is covered and not covered? Not for full-time, just.
Yeah, so for these employees who aren't on our health plan, the $25 would get them, access to our family nurse practitioner. We would offer a limited number of labs. So like there's blood work where it costs $4, $6. In a private insurance carrier, these things cost upwards of $90, but we are situated where we're getting these cheap. We would include some limited labs, but no pharmacy at this time. So that's ultimately you would have time with a family nurse practitioner. They would give a diagnosis, write a prescription for you, a script, so you could go get it filled. And if there's some lab work involved, then we would offer that too.
Right, because there are some concerns that people think that they're getting free health care, like they're going to get CAT scans and whatnot.
No,
So
no,
that's
no.
why I just want you to clarify.
No,
That's
it's
all.
really only, they would never get a referral to go, see a physical therapist on our dime. It's only things we can provide within the clinic space.
Okay.
That takes place in a 20-minute visit.
So more like an urgent care? Is that what you're
Somewhat.
Yes.
thinking?
Like urgent care for acute care, not like
Yeah.
urgent care on bleeding. Like,
Yes,
we
yes,
can't
yes,
do
yes,
that.
yes.
So Rachel, in the exit interviews, have you had some people say that they wish they had health care?
Absolutely,
And that would help them stay,
absolutely.
of some sort?
Being benefit eligible is 100% one of the reasons that people leave.
Would the limited
Crosby?
healthcare be satisfactory?
What's that?
Would the limited, because what you were discussing is it's limited healthcare, it's not total
Yes,
healthcare.
correct.
So would that be better than nothing?
It's certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Crosby?
So, Tom, I just want to clarify that when we have these empty spots, we're paying for them anyways, right?
It's a fixed
So-
cost, so it's,
Okay, so it's not costing us anything to allow these employees to access the clinic.
Yep.
We're getting a $25 copay. For the staff that we lost in the previous agenda item, what did we spend training them? Do you know off the top of your head?
so I don't want to sit here and give you a number. That's, there's a real material cost to what Ron Pond puts into the hiring process, to the training cost that goes with that. Andy, how many employees have we hired and lost within 7 or 14 days? Just ballpark it. So when you just talk about repeatedly spinning your wheels,
Right.
I mean, we're paying Ron Pond, one of his major functions is to not let hiring be, Andy has some very capital projects, and you'll hear about the HVAC stuff coming up here shortly. Hiring is in Ron's lane, and basically that's what he's continuously doing. So yes, there's a real cost to that. I don't have that exact dollar value other than to say it's real and it's material.
That's okay. My point is, we could save a significant amount of money by allowing access to our clinic if we can even retain a handful of these employees.
There's no question. I'd stand by that 100%.
Okay.
No doubt.
I think the other piece is I'm looking at Christine, who works and hires with the principals are special education paraprofessionals. I don't think we've had a day in our system where we've had 100% of our paraprofessionals in attendance. I don't think a school has had a day where they've had 100% of their paraprofessionals in attendance. And so again, this also gives that employee group access because most of them are also not benefit eligible. And so the training that goes into that group is also just enormous. And so this is a really big employee group that we can hopefully help.
I'm very much in favor of this.
Tom, there's a part in there that says people that are employees that opted out can now access it. Does this include the people that got paid out to opt out?
Yes. They would pay $25 per visit for an appointment.
Even though they got paid out to opt out?
They're gonna get paid out no matter what. So if they want to see, Becky Halverson at the clinic for an appointment, they would have to, of that $3,000 they're paid to opt out. I should take that back, because I don't think it sounds right to say it that way. We're not paying them to opt out. If they choose the family plan, we're paying about $20,000. To control cost, we offer $3,000 to decline it. So
Correct.
all things being equal, if your spouse has a plan, hey, we'd like you to take it. It helps our bottom line. So we'll pay you, we'll incentivize that. But then when that employee's not on our health plan, they can pay then $25 to access that clinic. Correct. Again, if that employee, typically what we're talking about are full-time employees, mostly teachers that decline our offer of health. If they want to drive to wherever their doctor is, they're going to take a day of work off. We think we can have a chance to just run the clinic real quick, get your prescription, fill it, and then, hopefully we got your back quickly. We're not missing half days or full days. We're making this over your lunch break type thing. So the cost savings that we could get from curbing the need for substitute teachers because of teacher sick days, if you're at Rolling Hills, if you're at Section, like you have access to medical care really close. Do we want them to drive out to ProHealth or Aurora, wherever that might be? This creates the most convenient access for our employees. So whether they're declining our offer of health or a part-time employee, I think this is the right thing to do, all things considered.
Do you think that will lead to more employees taking the $3,000 and then thinking, well, I can just use the health clinic as well?
Yes, it could happen that way.
That's my
Especially if you're young, just
And that would
No,
save even more money, right?
Yeah.
if you're only going to the doctor once a year, you might decline our offer of health and just say, all I need is the clinic. We can't control that, right? Like, that's going to be the individual's.
So for me, I like it, but I just don't like that part of it.
I think we'll gather more information, though. I think to that question, yes, that's a possibility. And as Tom mentioned, clinic offers limited services at this time, right?
Correct.
It's not offering PT, it's not offering imaging, it's not offering. So for your young, healthy, I don't have anything, right? Like, seriously, right? Yes, it might meet that need. But I think it's too soon to say the magnitude of like that happening. I don't know that that's a fair statement that we can say yes or no to that. Being a realistic thing.
Like at the end,
Seems like a little double dip.
But
Jake?
you believe that'd be a cost savings, right?
I do. If
If
you
it
got
went
pink
that
eye,
route.
for example, you're going to your doctor, like, all I need is this prescription filled. And wherever your doctor might be, you're trying to go there. Now you're just driving to the high school and getting back to work real quickly. At some point, I'm going to say if that pink eye solution costs $2.10, I'm going to recommend we give them that so then they don't have to drive to Walmart after that to go get it filled. I think there's a lot of ways that we can make this thing work.
Well, there's
In
Do
the
they have
sense that it's a double.
access to Teladoc?
No, they won't. The only thing if they're not on our health plan, the only thing they would have access to is the clinic, not Teladoc, not our.
I'm talking about our full-time employees. Don't they have access to
They
that?
do. They do.
Okay.
So in a 24-hour or 24/7 sense, that makes sense. I think a lot of people rather just physically go see a doctor than look at their phone. you know, so, but there's a time and place where teledoc's helpful.
Okay. Jake?
You're talking about the lost time, but in addition to that, if people are declining benefits to use the clinic, you know, how many times a year with limited services and coverage, that'd be a cost savings too in and of itself, right?
Yep, yep.
Pretty significant.
So once we go through the whole year, we can say, here's how much the clinic cost, here's how many visits we had, here's the average price per a visit. We can then evaluate that and reevaluate that $25 fee, so they're paying their fair share. So I don't look at it as a double dip. If they're going, they're paying, so that's it.
And we have the existing capacity to absorb
Right.
this.
Yep. If we want to pay for this clinic and let it sit empty and have employee issues, by all means, we can do that. I don't recommend it. So we have the space. Let's use it to our advantage.
All right, any other comments? All right, let's move on to student learning.
Okay, so the first item for student learning is just informational, and that is to inform you that we tried this year something different with our historical staggered start at the kindergarten level. We were going to be starting so late in the school year this year as it was that we decided this would be the year to pilot removing the staggered start. And staggered start, again, half of our students come the first day, and then half of our kindergarten students come the second day. After surveying the teachers who tried this for this year, there was a strong opinion that it is best to support students to reinstate that staggered start. And so we have made the decision to do so for next year again. So just wanted to inform the board. Any questions with that?
All right, thank you.
Okay. The second then is I've been asked to bring the discussion of weighted grades back to the table. Some of you will recognize back in, just as I was coming into this position in the 2019-2020 school year, was the last time that we looked at the topic of weighted grades. At the time, it was the Student Learning Committee, the 3-member Student Learning Committee that looked at it after, I would say, probably about a 4-month review of weighted grades. At that time, the Student Learning Committee voted 3-0 to not move forward with weighted grades. It continues, and I should explain why. At the time, there was a feeling that it potentially kept students from taking classes that would be more beneficial for them, that it would definitely start some playing games at the high school that the group at the time had no interest in. And at the time, we had quite a few districts in our area that were telling me that they were looking to potentially get rid of weighted grades. And so it looked like we would be coming into something just at the same time that a huge group of districts were going to leave it. You're going to see that has not ended up being the case in 5 years. So we're going to talk about that. It continues to be a situation that parents and teachers at the high school definitely bring up. I would say I alone get probably about 2 phone calls a year from parents, but they are taking the time. They feel strongly enough about it. They're taking the time to reach out and inquire why we don't have weighted grades. And just to emphasize from the memo, weighted grades simply would be a student gets a grade and we put it on their transcript and it goes into their GPA on a 4.0 scale. So an A would be a 4.0. That's what goes into calculate a GPA. A weighted grade would be saying if a student took an AP class, that to recognize the rigor of that AP class, that score is now going to be based on a 4.5. And so basically it allows students to take the chance of a more rigorous course, but it to not negatively impact their GPA and class rank as a result. So in looking at it again, I just put together some talking points that I said I would on the memo to just go through. The first one being just looking at local districts. So you will see at this point that this is what it looks like. We have all of the districts on the left that have some form of weighted grades. And the only district in our immediate Waukesha County area that does not have that is would be Arrowhead High School.
I did survey do a brief survey of the districts on the left this time around to say, are any of you thinking of removing weighted grades from your system? The only district that said yes was Sussex Hamilton High School. The rest of them said, no, we are sticking with them. That's first point I want to make. Second is just to go through kind of what is a common thought to the advantages and disadvantages to weighting. So the advantages to weighting would be that it does encourage students to take a more rigorous schedule without a penalty. And that matters to us as a system because there's also research to say that students that take an AP exam specifically and achieve a 2 or higher on it, and 3 is generally considered passing. Generally, a college will give credit for a score of 3 or above. There's a few exceptions to that depending upon the exam and the college that they're headed to. But students who achieve an exam score of 2 or higher, colleges would say do significantly better in introductory college courses. So those classes absolutely can be an indicator of students that are going to be successful that way. Students who achieve exam scores of a 1 or 2, so in other words, students who successfully take an AP class, take the exam, but potentially only get a 1 on it, are still more likely to graduate from college on time. So that's the advantage of our students taking a more rigorous course load, is that there's research to show that they are going to be more successful in high school from even taking 1 or 2 AP classes and learning that content and learning how to study that way. I would say there's also an advantage to weighting in the scholarship process. Out of the couple parents that call me every year, I would say at least one of them is a parent who believes strongly that their child missed out on a scholarship opportunity at some point, because even though I will tell you that the colleges unweight weighted grades in order for acceptance to college, or that's what they tell us they do, scholarship process is not always that case. So there are concerns in our system. There have been parental concerns in our system that have come up on parents that are concerned that their child lost out on a significant scholarship because of class rank or a GPA related to us not having weighted grades. And then finally, the last bullet point you're going to see on the advantages and disadvantages, depending on how you look at it. Right now, our salutatorian, our valedictorian and salutatorian process, our valedictorian process recognizes any student with a 4.0. So we might have 14 valedictorians in a year, you'll remember, or we might have 20 valedictorians in a year, depending on how many students have a 4.0. An advantage to this for some people would be that it would probably narrow it down to a valedictorian and a salutatorian by the time that you factor in the weighted grades.
This is what, like graduation last year, many parents and students even reached out and they said, look at Diego. He didn't have a chance to separate himself at graduation with all of his grades and the classes he took. So this is one of the things that brought up to me as well.
So I've done a study the last 5 years. I have been keeping track of our valedictorians and how many AP classes they do take. Like what are we seeing from our 14, 12 valedictorians? I would say easily all but about 2 of those students generally have a very rigorous AP classes that they've taken. The last couple years we've seen 2 or 3 maybe that have had 1 or 2 AP classes that are getting that 4.0 and achieving that status. But you are right, there's no differentiation currently in our system in those 14 that get the 4.0. As far as disadvantages of weighting, these are the things that you will hear. You'll hear that it definitely can hurt enrollment in elective classes. We may have students that normally would have decided to take an extra music class or an art class or a business class that are now deciding to take an AP class because in order to have a higher GPA, therefore class rank, that they're going to sacrifice potentially an elective class in order to take the AP class. Some people will refer to the game playing that students and parents play with weighted grades because a student that takes a lot of weighted classes and does well in those classes is potentially definitely going to have a higher GPA, therefore become the valedictorian. I'm going to say that some people in our system would say there's game playing without weighted grades because students are choosing to take an easier English class instead of AP, so they get the A. And then my question would be, are we really preparing them for the rigor of college at that point? So although I include this one because you're going to hear a lot about that from systems that have weighting, the game playing that starts to happen, I think there's game playing either way for potentially for students that want to be valedictorian and are trying to figure out how to do that. Some systems will talk about the mental health of students, the mental health of a student that wants to be valedictorian, therefore is taking way more AP classes than they can handle. Again, I've had teachers in our own system talk to us about the mental health of students that are trying to become one of 14 of our valedictorians and maintain that GPA. So I think there's some things in the system that, depending on a student's goal, it's hard for us to, we can definitely talk them through it. We can definitely have counselors talk about course load and the rigor of a course load, but I'm not sure that we can be in total control of a parent and a student's decision to go for something academically that is a goal of theirs and what that does technically to their mental health. And then finally, the valedictorian and the salutatorian process. It is a disadvantage of weighting if we like the fact that we have 14 valedictorians, 12 valedictorians every year, and that we're giving credit to a 4.0. So those are some of the big ones that you'll hear talked about. Questions at this point?
I don't have any questions, but I'm in favor of the weighted grades. I think we should reward those kids that are working hard and give them incentives. Jake?
Stephanie, when you say that college is unweight, does that mean like UW system, or does that mean everyone? Or
So
do you know?
5 years ago when I did this, and then I did this again about 2 years ago after a couple parent phone calls. I touched base with the colleges. The colleges continue to emphasize that they unweight the grades, and that's pretty much any college or university that I'm talking to, private, public, that they unweight those grades to decide acceptance. That while they absolutely give credit and want to see students taking a rigorous schedule and that being really important to them, that they're going to unweight the grades. I will tell you the place that I continue to have some concern about this. Well, I do believe them that they unweight the grades. I also think that some colleges and universities look at class rank. And they can't see the students that sit around the students. So if they're getting a class rank, let's say they're in the 15th percentile of their graduating class, they can't see if 20 students in front of them have a higher GPA, therefore class rank, because they didn't take as many AP classes. So even though they say they unweight them, I do need to say that I have some concerns that it technically could impact a student getting into college for that reason, is they don't necessarily, even if they're unweighting and trying to even it out, they can't necessarily see in that student's class what's around that student.
So there's other parts of the criteria that it could potentially be impacting.
And there's
Yes.
currently a bill that's up for debate, I think, that talks about the UW system being required to admit the top 5%, I think it was, Stephanie,
Yes.
from all Wisconsin high school graduates into the university system. So if you're gonna look at that top 5%, you wanna make sure that that top 5% is the accurate college-bound group, because that is a tremendous opportunity, the direct admit, to one of our universities in the state. Great state school system.
And that actually was referenced when I sat in a meeting recently and said, are any of you thinking about getting rid of unweighted grades at this point? That was definitely referred to by some of the districts as how then are we really going to accurately decide our top 5% for this direct admit that's going to become a definite competition and a definite advantage for students for getting in.
Erica?
So I think since I've been on the board, we have gone through this 3 times, at least.
I would guess.
And I have been of the same opinion each time, I think until today. So I've always been, no, let's keep them unweighted, because we have seen, even among our board reps, students sitting at these tables and in our schools that are killing themselves in their AP classes for what? And the argument being, well, actually, the benefit of the AP class is the AP class itself. It doesn't need to be a weighted grade. It doesn't need to be 4.5. It is for the potential AP points that gets you credits for college, prepaid kind of thing. Like, we're like, well, that's the benefit. It doesn't have to be a weighted grade. That was one of our biggest arguments, the mental health behind it. The electives. We have such a robust elective that we wanted selection, that we wanted to protect that. That being said, each time we've made these decisions, it's been based around the fact that all the other schools were going to go away from weighted grades. So it was to be able to be comparable to them. Seeing that they're not doing that, it's kind of like, well, then what are we doing, really? I have reservations. I think a lot of these disadvantages are very real. The top 5% is a big deal. I'm okay with trying it if we want to go weighted. That would be my opinion. But I have reservations, but at the same time, we're also looking at scores at our high school that have changed. Could this play a part? I don't know.
Tom?
So having worked in the Office of Institutional Research at Wisconsin Whitewater, you know, we would work with.
You were the janitor. Come on, T-Cart, really?
They gave me a computer, Craig. So we would work on, do a lot of the admissions data analysis. And when you have applicants from 40 or 50 states with, you know, tens of thousands of applicants, how do you compare a 4.3 GPA to a 3.7? You know, when one's weighted and one's not. So when they unweighted, it's just one evaluation point and a number of evaluation points. You know, every admissions officer is going to look at the individual applicant. You know, if there's an essay involved, you know, did you improve from freshman year to senior year? There's so many things that go into it, but as a baseline, they have to unweight that so they can just make one level playing field as one piece of the story, not the entire story.
Crosby?
Can we go back to the advantages slide real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it says students who achieve an exam score of 2, even though 3 is considered passing, correct? Tend to do better in an introductory college course.
And when I say passing, I should clarify that too, because there's really not quote-unquote passing on an AP exam. We call it passing because that's generally a 3 or higher is generally where the colleges will come in and give college credit.
Okay. So even if it's a 1 or 2, they're more likely to do well in college as well, it seems. I'm assuming this is national data, not our own
Correct.
internal data.
Correct.
So doesn't that also suggest, which I'm completely indifferent to weighted grades, to be honest, but doesn't it imply that we need to up the rigor of all of our coursework so that all of our students are doing better in college? I'm just a little concerned that a 1 and a 2 in an AP class is a determining factor of if they're doing well, not if they're excelling, but that just they're doing well. Are we under-preparing our students, I guess is my question.
Obviously, that's something that we're constantly looking at in our system, because no matter if a student has, right, we're not just saying, hey, our students that took AP classes, we want you to be successful in college. We want any student who decides to go to a 4-year college, if that's their pathway, to do well. I think there is just something to, you know, the AP courses are a curriculum offered by the college board. The fact that there is a test at the end of it raises stakes to the studying that happens with it. I just think there's factors in there that are hard to replicate with every course, although definitely, I mean, if you sat in our PD sessions today, we talked quite a bit about rigor in the PD sessions today and trying to ensure that all of our students have a level of rigor. So if students are doing well, if they're getting an A at a class in Mukwonago High School, it means something. And it means something about success no matter what pathway they choose.
Yeah, and this, I mean, I'm not meaning this to be negative on our
No,
school or anything like
yeah.
that, because obviously this is national data, so that's
Yeah.
concerning from a national standpoint. I just, am asking the question if we need to address rigor, which it sounds like we are.
Yes.
Jake?
If we were to make a change like this, do we go back and retroactively recalculate GPAs? How does that work? Just
We would-
curious.
Yeah,
You
so
asking
we would
for a
be
friend?
looking at a target implementation time.
Correct.
So it would be for, say, for instance, the freshman class of the starting sophomore year, it would be the junior class of what, we would have to pick a point in time. This would not be, this really wouldn't be benefiting our current senior class
So any AP
Or
classes
junior
that were
class.
already-
or junior, but we would have to start with the class of 2027. I don't know if that's the right number or
Okay.
not, but we would have to pick a point and then stick with that point.
Got it.
Joe, do you have an opinion on this?
I think that this, I mean, it does a couple of things, and Stephanie and I have had a conversation. I've worked in high schools that have had and have not had the weighted grade for the AP. When I see this, I think that the weighted grade for us will help us at our secondary, our high school achievement. I think it will draw kids into a more rigorous course load. It will help ultimately with that school report card component of it. On a couple of meetings that I've had with Kyle and Kylie, early on in the year, they did that student concern survey. And one of the concerns that the students brought forward was weighting. And Kyle and Kylie have represented that in a couple of our conversations. It's, we are working very hard in those courses. They are college level courses. So I'm supportive of it. And I do think it helps move the needle forward for us academically at MHS.
Honestly, we could bring you teachers here that would argue vehemently either way, depending upon what they teach and what their philosophies are. So I think it's a situation where, like Dr. Cook is saying, we have to make the decision on, do we think that this will move us achievement-wise as a district? Yes.
Will we eventually have to look at adding AP classes if we go this route? Like, do you think we'll get a lot more people wanting to take AP classes for this reason?
Do you mean adding different AP classes, or that we would see the numbers go up in the AP classes we offer currently? So do I think that we'll see an uptick in the students taking? Yes, I do, definitely. How much? Hard to predict, but yeah, I think we will see an uptick. As far as adding, because there's definitely AP courses that we don't currently offer that you can bring in, I don't see that necessarily impact. I mean, we've looked at that from year to year and make the decisions. I don't see that process changing.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Dale, weren't you valedictorian of the art department at Milwaukee South?
Culinary. All right, moving on to MHS schedule.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Jim Darren to come up to table and join us for this conversation. Tom, could you flip it to the other presentation, please? Thank you. So we've been talking about this high school schedule for quite some time, and we're ready to bring
Hello,
to
Mr.
committee.
Darren.
Good evening, everybody.
We're ready to bring to the committee a recommendation after really about an 8-month process of having this discussion and doing some work around it. So the priorities that Jim and I set with the staff that looked at this, and it was our department heads really that were heavily involved in the discussions and meeting on a regular basis to discuss this, and then taking information back to the staff and bringing feedback back. The priorities that we set for the new schedule would be that we wanted to have more instructional minutes for each class and/or more touch points per week. In other words, right now our classes are meeting 3 days a week, so that we wanted more instructional minutes, but potentially also the students seeing more than 3 hours a week. If we could get both, or three class periods a week. If we could get both, that would be the ideal world. We wanted some flexibility in the schedule. In other words, we wanted a situation where we could, if we missed a couple days of school because of cold or snow days, that we weren't missing necessarily instructional hours. We didn't feel like the current schedule allows for a great deal of flexibility, so if we could get that, that would be great. And then we also set a priority to cut down the instructional minutes that we were losing to advisory and flex, and what that would look like. So I'm going to first of all go through the
schedules that were looked at that we decided not to go with because we already had some teachers deciding to reach out to the board to say, hey, did you consider this schedule? Did you look at this? So we went through, as a committee, I went through this with the committee and agreed these are the reasons we left the schedules behind, and I just want to be very clear with you guys too. So the 8-period day, which is where we were at before our current schedule, there was not a lot of desire to go back to that schedule. First of all, most of our teachers no longer feel that the 45 minutes per class period is sufficient for all the activities that we do in class, and so to go back to that would feel like they were running a race. In addition, staff and students would be preparing for all 8 classes every day, and people didn't really have an interest in that too, did not see that as a positive. We talked about a 7-period day. 7-period day would cut elective opportunities. We've, as you know, many of you have worked really hard to build electives within our high school, and so to now, 5 years later, go back and cut some of those out didn't feel like a great direction at this point. There were definitely staffing considerations if we went to a 7-period day, and then we would have to look at graduation requirements again and change that again midstream after just changing it a couple years ago. A full block schedule, so this is where a student would take 4 class periods for a semester and then move to the second set and do longer periods. I will tell you that this was probably, Jim, the least appealing to the staff.
Not appealing at all.
Yeah.
Or anybody.
No, this did not go over well at all in discussion, so we probably spent the least amount of time on this one, or maybe the most, because it would come up in the negativity. There's huge, I just put a couple of the concerns on there. I would say the biggest is just the gaps in when students have certain classes. So for instance, a student could have Spanish 1 first semester of their freshman year and then not have Spanish 2 until second semester of their sophomore year. Now, obviously, schools that do that try to minimize any of that, but where we're concerned about the amount of time that students are seeing teachers for math, there would be a pretty large concern of a student having gaps in times away from math. And then our AP teachers had huge concerns about that, taking the test first semester and then not testing until, since that's a national testing date, not testing until later. What we called the Waukesha schedule, because it's the district that we know doing it. So they have an 8-period day on Mondays, and then they do a drop 2 the rest of the week. We didn't, I would say, didn't love the idea of the 8-period days on Monday. Like, we didn't like them in general, didn't like them even for a Monday. And we felt like it was really hard to be, it was impossible to look at building in a day of flex to do something academically and then take it out. It was a schedule that made it very, very difficult to do that. Like, we had to commit to flex 4 days a week, the days of the drop 2, or it just made it a little bit difficult. So AB block, which is what our middle school is operating on. So 8 periods, 4 a day that just rotate. There was a concern amongst the teachers, so the teachers did follow through and go to Franklin High School. A group of teachers went to Franklin High School to explore this one a little bit more and to have some conversations with another high school doing this. After that visit, these were the concerns that came about with this. They were worried about the fact that we feel like we're getting more instructional time, but the Franklin teachers seemed to suggest to them that they gave more work time in those 90 minutes, or they were reteaching things that were missed from time to time. So they questioned, they said, you're not going to be gaining as much instructional minutes as what you think you are, because what you have to do to compensate for a 90-minute block. That had people concerned. Breaks in classes, many times in a 90-minute class period, teachers are giving breaks for that, and so then what happens with the hallways sounds like a silly problem, but it becomes a huge problem if it's not monitored and is going well, so that becomes an issue. We would not have picked up, in fact, on this schedule, we would only be seeing the teacher or students 2 times a week sometimes. And so after talking about more touch points, a lot of our teachers were like, this is going backwards. We don't see the purpose in this. And then there was a lot of talk about needing to create skinnies in some classes and which ones would those be, and what would that look at? And then all of a sudden, we had quite a few teachers that were wanting skinnies, and then we're really operating off a different period day. You also know at the middle school, with this schedule, that we feel good about in so many ways, but we just had to add math minutes back in because we didn't think it was doing academically and achievement-wise what we wanted it to for math. So that lands us at what our recommended schedule is. Our recommended schedule is built off an 8-period day, but it is built in 4 days. So think of it as an A, B, C, D day, let's say. And those 4 days just rotate over and over and over again. So we no longer have a Monday day of the week, a Tuesday day of the week. It's built on 4 days, 6 periods a day that just rotate. And I'll give you a visual of what that would look like. And we'll go back to that too. But those are the 4 periods, and those four days just rotate over and over and over again. So what we get out of this schedule is this. 4 weeks of the month, students would see their teachers, 3 weeks out of the month, teachers would see their students 4 days a week. So we definitely build in a touch point 3 weeks out of the month. They're 63-minute class periods. So like some of our tech ed, music, art teachers had said 60 minutes was their break point. Like they wanted 60-minute class periods after where we've been and what we've had. And so this comes out to 63-minute class periods. Our students would still get 8 selections, so we're not taking any electives technically away from them. It equals 105 more minutes more a month in each class, which comes out to 15 3/4 hours a year for each class. It is flexible, and I'll explain that to you in a second when we can go back and look at the schedule. At the end, we did do a vote. It was a unanimous vote from all of our department chairs that this is the schedule that they wanted to go to and the one that they felt like would impact student achievement, but maintain some of the good things they wanted to. So as far as flexibility, let me just explain that to you. So again, there's 63-minute periods, this rotating these 4 days over and over again. But we could, for academic purposes, for instance, before final exams, put a flex period back in and have that for students to study for semester exams. Or we could put that flex period back in the schedule for 2 weeks before the ACT. So we can do some methodized prep during that time period. And then you'll see on the right-hand side, that flex schedule would still be 57-minute periods, so not too far off of that 60-minute mark that the teacher said. And again, we would use that sparingly, and we would use that for academic purposes as we have those discussions, but it does allow for that flexibility. Do you have something to add?
No,
at this point?
And again, we've seen that the last week with 2 of our snow days. You know, in our current schedule, Monday's a Monday, a Tuesday's a Tuesday, and so when we came back on Wednesday, we came back to a Wednesday schedule. Where in this, if we missed an A schedule because of a snow day, the next day would now become an A schedule, and I said this when we changed to our current schedule. The students get it right away. They really do. And it's even more convenient for them right now because if they have Infinite Campus on their phone, they can pull up their phone and see exactly what day it is before they even walk into the building. Or if they walk into the building and think, oh, I don't know what day it is, they can take a quick peek at Infinite Campus and it will be right there. So it does offer us a lot more flexibility than our current schedule does.
I like that you can add flex time when tests are coming up, because that's one of the things like some of the AP students were concerned about. When they get closer to test time, would they be able to have flex? So I like it.
So, should we go with the schedule and the board approves it at the end of this month? Our next steps would be the board approval. Jim and I would like to put together, in fact, we already have the people that would like to be part of this, a smaller advisor committee, to just get together and really work on the details of the schedule. We don't need all the department members around. In fact, more voices in this case sometimes makes it more difficult, but just to really go through the details of the schedule, to work out things like quarter dates and semester dates. Sue Brezovar has actually already put together a schedule that would work for Infinite Campus. I had her do some work just to make sure that the schedule would work. Obviously, communication to students, staff, and parents and what that would look like. And then we do want to be really, really intentional this time in a schedule switch. I don't think last time it was just switching the schedule, but maybe not being as intentionally as we could with our curriculum and our units to give the teachers the time this spring to like map out their first entire unit with this new schedule. What does that look like? How much further are you going to get down the road in things, or what does it look like to do this? We do know New Berlin, Eisenhower and New Berlin West operate off of a schedule very, very, very similar to this. And so our teachers have said, could we have some time, English department with an English teacher, saying, this is how I make this work. These are the things that I learned along the way, and this is what's helpful. And so I've already talked to the curriculum director in New Berlin, and she said, yeah, we would definitely be able to work with you that way, so we don't find out in the first year, so we don't have to wade through all the difficulties of it, but we can learn from a system that has put this in place and start the ground running with this too.
Any questions or comments? Erica?
I would assume this won't be a big problem with the fact that we already voted on next year's calendar. So like when you're talking about our quarter dates, our semester dates, because we always have like.
No, we mean
off.
fitting them into what we know to
What we
be our
already know is
quarter
coming,
dates and
okay.
our semester dates, just deciding how many days, yeah. Our staff has asked definitely in going to a new schedule that we think through, as they should, every single detail, and that we head into even the summer with a very, very clear what are our A days, where are A days falling, where are B days falling, that we just really think through, and that we think through academically when we know that we would want some flex periods in to help us academically. And so we just are thinking through those things so teachers know what that's going to look like in the course of a year.
So what are the downsides of this, and where will we fit in the curriculum that we've put into the days, the flex time, and those things?
Great question. So I don't worry about fitting our curriculum in. And I will encourage the departments to now not look at that extra 15 and 3/4 hours as what else can we add, but we'll be able to build things like reteaching in that right now our teachers might be saying we don't have time for that because we cut so many instructional hours out from, or minutes out from the one schedule, or from our schedule 6 years ago, 7 years ago to this one, that we're going to have time to make sure that our students are learning this information and we're not on a sprint through this.
No, I'm speaking of the things that were in flex and our.
Advisory.
Oh,
or
I see what
advisory
you're
lessons.
Yeah.
What are we gonna lose that way?
Yep. Where are we gonna put that, or are we not gonna abandon that, or?
Well, we're gonna put it where academically we feel like it's beneficial, but not have it wasting minutes out of our instructional time. So that's what we need to sit down and really take a look at with a group of teachers. We will have students, we will have parents, we will have teachers that say not having flex every day is going to be hugely detrimental to what is happening. We are going to have that. We are going to try to minimize that. And I think one of the huge advantages of this schedule is if we realize that we've taken out too much flex time and it's causing kids to not be able to get extra help, that it's causing students to not be able to make up work from when they're absent, that it's causing all those things that we would hear people say, we could flip it back in quite easily as much as it's needed to academically to flip it back in.
I think
Erica?
you also had, oh, go ahead, Erica.
I was just saying, along those same lines, I'm guessing this flex schedule option that you have here, so for advisory, I think it's the curriculum that we just spent a lot of money on that you're talking about for our advisory lessons. That it doesn't seem represented in this color sheet. So can you do that flex schedule once a week for advisory, or are we going to do fewer? I know you're saying that that's what you guys need to work on, but the thought process behind this appears as though it's removed. So is it not entirely removed, or just not figured out how to be put back in?
Yeah, I think one of the best things about this schedule is we can put it in anywhere, and that's what part of our mini committee is going to be addressing, is where do we absolutely have to have some advisory flex time throughout the school year, or our best case scenario. You know, we know we're probably going to get some flex times before AP tests, before final exams, before our statewide ACT day. Those can all be added in very easily to this schedule, where in our current one, we couldn't. And so that's part of what the mini committee is going to be doing, is trying to come up with that schedule, at least a skeleton of our schedule that we can start the year off with. And then, as Stephanie said, if it is not working, or if we find, you know what, flex is still not being used, we can take this out. Or, you know what, we need to give X amount of days to flex because kids are begging for it.
So I think we have 32 lessons a year for our advisory.
Yes.
Yes. I guess that's my point, is I just would like a definitive answer. Are we getting rid of advisory? Are we keeping it because it's not represented? And we keep waffling back and forth between advisory and flex, so I'm just focused on advisory.
So we are removing advisory. I guess we would call anything that happens during that time flex technically, but we do need to decide what ACP things we're doing that are required during that time. We need to take a look at the character strong lessons and see what's required during that time. We need the time to do that should this schedule go. I think the big thing is that we want the flex time when we have it in there to be intentional and not to have it be taking the place of instructional minutes when students are not doing anything with it.
Birds?
That was my question.
Gary?
I heard your answer, as this is how it's going to be. So, and I also heard the teachers requested that you have this nailed down before the beginning.
Correct.
I also heard you say that, well, we can try this, and then if it doesn't, we can change it. And I also heard you say that we
That's
don't
fair.
want to have students paying the consequences for what we're doing, because you can't go back for those students. So when Erica says, can you do something once a week? So if there are students, and they were discussed, and even our student reps last year did say that we're using the flex time for what the flex time was used for. This will have a huge impact on them. And so to just say, well, I have some concerns, I hear your answers, but they're not answering, if you can please understand what I'm trying to say.
No, I understand. If this board feels like you're comfortable with us keeping 2 flexes a week in there, 3 flexes a week in there, the schedule will absolutely allow for that. I honestly feel like this is a hard discussion, because I feel like our board is somewhat split on the flex discussion, and how much you guys are willing to have in there or not. So our plan is to put it in intentionally and come back with a schedule to say, we've put it in twice a week, this is what we'll be doing one of the days, or we've put it in for before final exams, and this is why we've put it in.
Getting to final exams is a little late if you're behind, and so you just have final exams. That's not helping that segment of the student population that is using it.
Dr. Cook?
If I could just jump in really quick. So the current schedule that we have provides the same thing to everybody, regardless if you need it or not, or regardless if you're going to take advantage of it or not. The schedule that's being proposed provides opportunity, either through study hall with lab, which is something that Stephanie and I have talked about, where students who need math help have a space to go to get that math help. Where students who need help in ELA and writing have a place where they could go to get help in ELA or writing. If you're sick from school in a schedule where there is no flex period, you go in, you talk to your teacher, you get your homework, you do that in a study hall, you do that before school, you do that after school. That's where you get the help. That if there's a school that does not have a flex period, that is the method that you would use in order to address it. And I think we have to be careful if we're going to put a schedule out there, we need to make sure that we prioritize, the academic and the CTE program that we have in place. Both of them are very, very good. And then when an exception needs to be made to that, like Stephanie had mentioned with ACT, AP, I mean, if we need to do a flex period before homecoming week to make sure that the kids understand what the behavior expectations are, we can fit that in there as well. But the schedule needs to address the academic and the CTE priority that we have at school. And if we have to work and make exceptions throughout the year, we can figure that out. The policy, the expectation has to be what the expectation is for all, and we will work on the exceptions as they come up. And that has been something that has come up time and time again. The first school board meeting that I was at in November of 2000, I'm losing my dates, 22, I think it was. The high school report card was presented, and one of the questions were asked at that time, why do we think that this is happening? Why do we think the data is going down? And one of the first things that was discussed was the current schedule. And we need to increase the number of contacts that we have and the number of instructional minutes. And to get 15 hours of instructional minutes across all classes, that is 15 days more of instruction than what we currently have in our schedule based off of what is being proposed from a minute standpoint, 63 minutes. And that is a remarkable accomplishment of instructional time. And that helps us move the dial forward when we talk about the school report card at the high school. And when we do need to make exceptions, we can work with the students who have those exceptions that need to be made.
Erica?
I think this sounds great. I think the touch points, the hours, everything, I'm all for it. I'm like, let's do it. I think that questions come from, maybe the fact that we've had some more heated discussions on this, and that part wasn't necessarily presented clearly. So I'm all for let's move forward with it, see what those exceptions look like. I think this sounds great. But to be fair, the clarification is based on the fact that this is something that has not been decisive and clear for us. So that is information that we will be looking for. And I think you're aware of that. And so I think they're fair questions, but I think this looks great.
Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
I look forward to the recommendations, and
Sounds good.
I'm going to trust your recommendations. You are the expert. Going down a path we're on, definitely we need to make a change by looking at the data coming out of the high school.
Yep,
So-
I feel good about this schedule.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darren. All right, student service topics. We don't have any. Finance and facilities, open enrollment.
So open enrollment seats this year, you have two documents in there. One of them is Christine's, and I will turn it over to her in a moment to go over the special education recommendations. But next week, in 2 weeks, we'll be coming forward with 4 recommendations. We utilize board policy 5113, and the following recommendations are going to be presented for discussion. That no open enrollment seats are vacant seats in special education grades 4th K through 12. The regular education open enrollment seats at the elementary level will be capped when a school's average class size reaches 20 students for 4-year-old kindergarten, 22 students for 5K in 1st grade, 24 students for 2nd and 3rd grade, and 27 students for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. There will be no regular education caps for grades 7 through 12. Open enrollment acceptance will not be guaranteed for the 2023-24 school year for current resident students who moved outside of the district. So for those kids that moved on, there's no guaranteed seat. And open enrollment acceptance will not be guaranteed for siblings of currently open enrolled students. Please note that despite the caps on vacant seats, the administration values open enrollment students, and we will continue to work to find space when available.
May I ask why there's no caps on 7th and 8th grade?
We look at the staffing like across the grade level. So if we have enough staff, and I'm just grabbing a ballpark number, for 350 students in 7th grade, and we're projecting to come back at, say, 330, we would then have space for 20 kids.
Got it.
That would be where the recommendation comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on that?
So Christine will have a moment just to go through the special education piece, as this, the special ed seats do require another level of analysis, which she has done.
All right, so we each year look at our pupil-teacher ratios. How many students do we have per teacher in the area of special education? And then we also look at our projected enrollment. So how many students are currently under evaluation when we go to make determinations for spacing for next year? Another area that's really important for us to take a look at is related services. So our students who are looking to open enroll, do they receive a service like occupational therapy or physical therapy or speech and language therapy? And so if you take a look at the graph or the table that's provided in the board doc, there's a couple of areas I'll just draw your attention to. We will have a significant spike in our 3 to 5-year-old early childhood cross-CAT students. So we'll go from 21 students that are currently enrolled this year to 31 next year. So there will be no open spots in special education. I'm just going to draw your attention to just a few areas. In cross-CAT special education K-6, we are increasing in our numbers. Our ratios are doable, but they are full. When I'm looking at middle school, they will maintain status quo for this year. We did not have open seats last year. When we're looking at the high school numbers, these numbers also include, when you're looking at cross-categorical numbers, those numbers also include all of our students, any students with IEPs at SOAR who are in the GETO 2 program, or students who no longer attend on our campus, but are still calculated into our students, if that makes sense. They still have to have a case manager within the school district. And then also when you're looking at the medically complex or our intellectual disabilities program, we have a flip-flop in the 2 programs. So we have a number of seniors who will be exiting at 18 and then going into the 18 to 21-year-old program. So we'll have to be looking at some staffing changes. But then also just briefly to look at the bottom where we see our different therapies. Our speech and language therapists are at capacity going into next school year. Our occupational therapists have a very robust caseload, to say the least. And our physical therapists, we only have one in the district, and she runs pretty high also. So we just don't have the availability or the capacity to serve other students at this time. Do you have any questions?
No. All right, is that it for open enrollment? All right, let's move on to budget year-to-date.
All right.
You have
this-
3 minutes, Tom.
I'll go quicker than that. So the point here is that we're doing well. We're fine. As we progress into the month of January here, I have no concerns right now about where our expenditures are relative to the budgets that we set in any of our areas. So I'll continue to come back every month between now and the end of the year. I don't do this in the beginning of the year because it's just too early to project anything. So now that we're over the halfway point, no concerns at this time. One thing I will state, though, is that unlike I have never done this in my prior years, is submit a budget amendment. So we submit a budget in October. Sometimes we approve some expenses. So, for example, we did the Care Solace thing with Christine. Christine, please remind me, how much did we approve that for? And that's money we were already given, but that wasn't an expense we built in at October. So when we add an expense like that for $48,000, give or take, okay. And we do things like this throughout the year. We're going to aggregate those and say, here's an amended budget. It's based on our starting point, the changes we made throughout the year, and it shouldn't be materially different, but that's one thing we might do come May. Okay, just letting you know, but there are no concerns at this time. Okay? If there's anything you want to see at any point, just please let me know. Send me an email, or Dale, you can forward it on to me if you want your board members to let you know, and I'll report on anything you're looking for.
How about insurance? Where are we at insurance?
So if you take a look, it's embedded. So you're really looking at Fund 10 and Fund 27 under employee benefits. It's the most major component within employee benefits. I will bring that in 2 weeks. Okay, I'll give you an update when we meet then. Our data is now complete through December.
Nice.
So I'll bring that back, but,
Can you compare where we're at now, where we're like last year?
Yeah.
As far as cost?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, moving on, number 3, HVAC
Okay.
controls.
so Andy Wagner's gonna join us here. We're just gonna give you a brief update on what we'd like to do here as we move forward, with updating our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning components in the district. Andy, go for it.
All right, so I guess I'm going to start out with the challenges that we're dealing with right now. And I've been in this position 5 years. So with that, I've assessed this over that time. Prior when I was a building manager, we were using mainly one system, Train controls throughout the district. During the last referendum, we switched the high school over to what's called Niagara Tritium. It was a more open product. Some of the challenges that we've been dealing with since that was brought online is that we have our own internal people that work on the system. We have an HVAC company that works on the system, and then we have the controls system. So there's a lot of people within the mix. Currently, we have 5 schools that are on Train. We have 2 schools that are on Niagara, 1 school that is on just open controls in the building, and this building is on a wireless system that's separate. So there's a lot of different moving parts of trying to control this district at one time and be energy efficient at the same time. So all that together, the Niagara system that was brought into the high school was really forethought of, again, being that open system, being able to be controlled. Some of the things that I've incurred over the time with this, as well as Train, and that is we're paying for license agreements every year, and they're costly. So this last year, we've spent over $8,000 just in license agreements on products that we're using to control our buildings. Beyond that, then we have to get a third party involved every time we need to make a change or fix something that is in controls. So most of you know Andy Hoppy and the company he works for, ACS Advanced Chiller Services. They're our preferred company for our HVAC needs in the district. He is, I'll call him bilingual in the sense of HVAC. He works on the equipment as well as he does the controls. However, the controls that we have, both Train and Niagara, he cannot fully control himself. So he represents another company, Carrier Controls, a product called iView, that he can program himself, he can design himself, and we could bring this all down to one type of company servicing us. Currently, we're just troublesome in the fact that having that need, we're sitting here now, and I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Corporate. So I guess where I'm looking to go is I'm looking to bring in iView into our district. This would bring us to one sole source company working for us. Now, if we ever got to the point that we were in trouble with that company or they dissolved or what have you, there's 35 other companies within Southeast Wisconsin that could work on that system. But it does leave us to kind of not having to broaden out so far. The other part that came to me through our IT department this last month is that the current system we're on at the high school, they're looking for us to do an upgrade this year, and that's going to be another $10,000 to do that. However, if we would make this change to iView, we would not have to outlay that funding to do that. So, in short, I'm making a motion or bringing information to you to do this change that's going to better our services. It's not just for the HVAC controls, it's we can control our lighting from it. We can control other aspects. We can control our energy from it. We can see our energy. and we can build upon this as we go. So the first part of my proposal is to just bring our heavy end equipment over. That would be our boilers, our air handlers, and our chillers. Once we have that data and control in our buildings, we can then go to our smaller units. So our air handler is supplying a wing of a school, and in that each room has what's called a VAV or a univent. Like that's Clarendon has univents in all the classrooms. Those we can control by adding that in as it fails, or we can add in a wing at a time, okay? So it will make us more cost effective in going this route, I feel. Part of the idea of where we're going with this, I took Tom on a tour up to Mukwonago School District, and my counterpart up there is Kyle Thompson. He is very knowledgeable in the HVAC systems because he used to work for Johnson Controls, and then he went into the school districts to work there. Being that he used to work for Johnson Controls, you'd think maybe he'd be interested in bringing that system in. He's doing the same thing. He's using the iView system, and he's actually using Andy Hoppy and his company to do that work. We looked at the funding model as to how to do this. So currently, we would typically put everything out for an RFP, send it out for proposal to multiple companies to bid on the process. The system they use up there is they get quotes from all companies that have the same discipline and get their hourly rates, and they work from the hourly rate system as to bidding that out. So you would have that option, is that we could do the same thing by having that list. Now, I have created a list by contacting other vendors that we work with in the same discipline. ACS, Advanced Chiller Services, is at the bottom of what we pay for hourly rate. Johnson Controls is well over $265, and they're down at $131. When they put together a process for us to do this particular upgrade, they've actually lowered their rate to $125 an hour to do the work for this upgrade. I've looked at our bylaws or policies here too, and a lot of this authorization is through the business manager. And so by that, we do have the rights to go in that direction, and you could look that up if you would like to. But for the information I've put together in the memo, and for the reasons that I've listed here quickly, I think it's in our best interest to move forward with the iView system, get everything in the district on one level.
So the way that we would pay for this is that when we went through our various rounds of ESSER funding, that when we met with the community, we asked, what should we use this money for? Updating our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning units and getting better air quality throughout all of our buildings was something that the community supported. So when you use federal funds to purchase large projects like this, you have to jump a ton of hoops, and it ain't fun. So what we did was we took existing expenses that we had. The ESSER funding reimbursed us for just about $1 million, and we've had this $1 million earmarked to do these projects. But this money is more than sufficient to accomplish these projects. So in essence, this was one-time money to attack this one-time project. Okay, so we have the funding to do this. Andy referenced board policy 6320. It says in some, when we purchase, you know, we like to do competitive bids, at least getting quotes, you know, 3 quotes on something that's standard. But there are times when we feel that an RFP or a sealed bid process isn't advantageous to us. So when we met with Kyle Thompson at Mukwonago, and he talked about his experiences as the facility manager at Frederick Hospital and at Mukwonago, coupled with his experience, we can have an open source situation where we can see everything that's being purchased, the rates we're being charged. The RFP process kind of ties you, because once you write that document, they're going to perform to that document. there's gonna be times when we have to deviate from that document because, you know, our building needs change or we need more or less work. And this allows for us to stay flexible and nimble as we attack a huge project. And we think with Andy Hoppy at ACS being the right guy for this is the direction we'd like to go. So we do have this money already budgeted in Fund 46, but we just felt it was good to come talk to you about this here before we commence on this work. Are there any issues or concerns or things you want to know about this?
Clean air, so the clean air idea, Andy, give us an idea. How much clean air? I mean, is there a baseline? How is this going to improve our kids' health? Is that part of it?
The clean air is part of it, but the controls is really the on-off and the energy aspect when it comes down to it.
So is it energy savings?
It'll be energy savings, it'll be usability, it'll help us in the sense of making sure that we have equipment on correctly. We're going through really cold temperatures right now. There's certain things that we cannot control currently from home or away on a Saturday where we could most likely do it better with this new program. So there's times we're coming into the building to flip a switch. And for instance, Emily Wagner, who's the building manager at the high school, she lives in Palmyra. She'll drive in to flip a switch sometimes to drive home. I pay her 2 hours each time she does that. You know, like that's just one instant. But in the air quality, we've done everything that through the service that we had do our survey. That was
Ring du yeah.
Rue du Chet. And we've gone through the MERV 13 filters. We have those in the district. So I feel that all our air quality is to where it needs to be from the recommendations that were done during.
So between ESSER funds and Fund 46, we're good.
Oh, we're good. And this isn't just solely air quality, not to say it doesn't matter, but there's equipment failure that's on the horizon. This is just one of those things that's come and due. You know, a lot of things we have are older than you, Craig.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a little miscombobulated with my comments earlier. Part of this is the controls itself, the thermostats on the wall, the computer controls. Part of this also is the aged equipment that we have in our buildings. So a lot of the actual valves that open and close to bring the hot water or the cold water to the unit, some of those are aging, some of those are failing, so they need to be replaced. The other benefit of us working with ACS is they're a company that are allowing us to do as much work as ourselves possible. So I would probably put this out to another company, being Niagara, and they'd want a third party to come in and replace all the control valves in the building and not have us do it. So now I'm paying an hourly rate for that as well as the hourly rate for the other company. Again, whatever our people in the district can do for the rate that they're working and they have the time and the will-how to do it, I think we're cost savings penny wise, right?
We no longer have to outsource.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Budget calendar.
All right, so I gave you a copy of the budget calendar. So this is an annual action item that we take, and I just present this so you know where we're headed as we move through the rest of the fiscal year and approach the 24-25 school year. So we know all of our major funding amounts. We just talked about open enroll students. That's a revenue and an expense for the kids that come in and the kids that go out. So we know what those per student amounts are. At this time, the only things that are unknown are how many kids will we have on the third Friday count and how much aid will the state give us when we create our overall pot of money, how much will they contribute towards that. So those are the two big things that we're waiting to know. Other than that, we know all the funding pieces. So I just have a proposed budget calendar there. If you're good with it, that's how we'll operate, and we'll take action on this later this month, and then we'll start month by month attacking the budget. If there's any adjustments you want to see, let me know.
All right, any questions for Tom? All right, thank you.
Sure.
Small territory detachment petition.
Yep, so this is that time of year where school districts, when there's somebody who wants to detach from their property or from their school district and attach to a different one, this has to be done really by the end of February. So we have a request for a property that's in the Palmyra Eagle School District, would like to detach from their district and then attach to our district. You know, in the past, we had a couple of these where they were in Kettle Moraine were the most recent ones, but they weren't bordering our district. Okay, they were
They're an island.
they would have been an island. It would have not been contiguous. So at any rate, this family is on our border. Okay, so I will actually I have the map up. I'll just share this very quickly here so you can see. But then this is something that we'll invite the family to come to our board meeting in February. This is a step in the process here. Here we go. All right, so I'll just bring up two here. So this is, our district is here. This is Highway 59. So this is like, you know, North Prairie right here, town of Eagle. And the property is right on that border there. Looking at it a little more closely, this is the property. So we'll invite this family to come in. They can talk to us and explain, you know, what they're looking for. The Palmyra Eagle School District is inviting this family in, I believe, on February 5th. We'll invite them to our meeting on February 12th. Their board will approve or deny. You guys will do the same thing, and then we send our decision off to the DPI. So we'll wait and see how Palmyra Eagle responds. They might deny it and say, nope, we'd like to not let you.
Why don't they open and roll?
We would have to wait until an executive session to discuss the specifics of any child in an open enrollment process.
So yeah, they have, any family has this right to go through this process, so this family is moving towards this here at this time. So just giving you a heads up at this time, there's no action to take. There are 7 criteria that I included in what I gave you in the packet there. So just kind of reading through those to say, like, what are these criteria you all should consider when somebody is trying to detach from one district and come to another. So at the end of the day, it's your call. If both districts are in agreement, basically it happens. If there's a disagreement between the districts, and the DPI Boundary Appeal Board steps in. So just an update and FYI for the moment. Okay?
Okay.
That's it.
I have a quick question. What happens if that family moves? What happens? Is that property permanently attached to our district?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Stays with us.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tom? All right, thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Moving on to action items, hire, retirements, and resignations.
Finicky microphone. We just have one. She's currently, she's already been an employee in our system, but because she's a title teacher, Carla Modglin, she started with us, then she took a leave, and because it was a limited term contract, we had to rehire her after that leave. So we're just bringing her back. She serves one of our private schools and then Prairie View Elementary School. So we're recommending that we bring back Carla.
Awesome.
As a Title I.
I make a motion that we approve.
Second. Motion and second. Any discussion or comments? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion carries. All right. Next on the agenda is executive session, Wisconsin Statute 19.85. We'll be discussing administrative contracts, discuss litigation related to Policy 5514, and post-retirement benefits. Cherry, do a roll call, please.